Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
All right, to share my screen.
Yep, you're on.
All right. And to advance the screen, I've got to go back
To
to
that.
the PDF,
Fabulous.
roll up, and then to get back to Chrome. Okay. All right.
I'll stay with you for a minute.
Okay. I'm a Zoom person. not a
I
Google.
love Zoom. Zoom is my favorite.
And an Outlook person, not a Google person. But they all work very similar. And a PC and not a Mac. Everybody has preferences.
Uh-huh.
All right, I'm going to pass out some documents.
Thank you, Bert. I was just gonna pull it up on Outlook.
Oh, got one?
Yeah.
There you go.
Thank you.
Let me give you that. We've got it on the display, but if you want to make notes on it as we're going through it, because I'll give you some numbers, how to fill things in.
Great.
Let's see. Let me turn on the video. I am unmuted. Can you hear me, Stephen?
Yep, loud and clear.
Okay, sounds good.
Oh, hey, Bruce. Are
Yeah.
you around later this afternoon?
I am.
Okay, I got a project that I want to talk to you about helping me with. So I'll
That sounds
talk to you later this afternoon.
okay. That sounds good.
And I'm just kind of popping in here for a little bit. I've got a 10 o'clock call I'll jump on, but I just wanted to kind of pop in and show
Okay.
my support.
Look now.
That one.
That one.
No, the red one. Okay, it's still being recorded. Hi, good morning.
Hey,
got your little situation over there, Val?
downstairs to do whatever.
Oh, yeah, I like to spread out.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you, Bruce. Yeah.
Glenn, if anybody else comes in, I'm going to leave these right on.
Oh, absolutely. I'll take care of it. I'll dish them.
Are we gonna go over the whole contract or are we just going over the changes?
The listing agreement, going over the whole listing agreement.
Right. Oh, the listing agreement. Okay.
Yep.
Oh, I don't think we were doing that.
The contract is, the agreement of sales is in 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Our next
Yeah.
one.
I know, it's hard to keep.
That's right. I wish everybody had a birthday.
Yeah, when I said, oh my goodness, that's when it started, I had to hit everybody.
I know.
And I tried to go through it, right?
And then I don't know other people, I try to be friendly. Deep breath, deep breath.
You can use Good morning, everybody.
Morning, everyone. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Morning.
Good morning. Today, we're going to go ahead and get started. Let me get my camera adjusted so you can see me better. I'm not used to sitting down when I teach, but we'll make this work. Today, we start a series of twice a month going over documents. So twice every month, the first Wednesday and the third Wednesday of the month, we'll be reviewing documents and we'll be rotating them. We're starting off with the listing agreement. In a couple of weeks, we'll be doing the agreement of sale. And then in a couple more weeks, we'll be doing the buyer agency agreement. And we'll do other topics and other forums intermittently as well. But it's designed, new agents should be here. Agents have been with the company for a while are welcome to be here. We're going to go over the listing agreement today in detail, as I would recommend perhaps that you present it to your client. So what I've got on the screen, and just stop me if you have any questions. I suppose you can either speak up, unmute yourself and speak up. If you use a chat box, I assume that Google Meet has a chat box here. I'll try to keep my eyes on that. But if you unmute yourself and speak up, that'll be fine. What I've got is the Delaware Association of Realtors Standard Listing Agreement. And I'm going to change my screen so I can scroll through better. Okay, so we're using the exclusive right to sell listing agreement. It's a Delaware Association of Realtors standard form. You don't have to use standardized forms in Delaware. It's not the law, but everybody does use them, and we encourage that you use them because it represents a practice of all three counties. It's got representatives on the forms committee of all three counties. We use the best practices. It's designed so it can be used between brokerages and everybody's using the same form and language. It's been endorsed, approved, recommended by the Delaware Association of Realtors. So we always use standard forms if there is a standard form. There are a few instances where DAR doesn't have a standard form, like a pre-occupancy agreement. Well, we don't recommend those anyhow, but we have our own in-house documents if we need something that DAR does not provide. So we start off with the brokerage organization. For those of you that are new, this is where we're going to put in Coldwell Banker Premier. Now, we refer to them as the listing broker throughout the document, but really in the definition in the Delaware rules and regulations, it's the brokerage organization is what that's called, and it's the firm. It's Coldwell Banker Premier. So that's going to go on that first line. Yes.
I was told that I should also add like to a dash after that, like the office that I'm associated with Lewis. Does it matter?
You can put that if you want, but you're really hiring Coldwell Banker Premier, not so much Coldwell Banker Premier Lewis.
Okay.
But you can put that if you want.
Okay.
I don't know that it's necessary, but
Okay.
So then we go down number 2, section number 2. We refer to them as sections now. Is the seller's name and mailing address. Now, here's where I want to start getting into some specifics. A seller, you need to be verifying in a tax record who the seller is. Sometimes somebody will call you and they'll want to sell a property, but they're only part owner. So you want to go into the tax records and see, you can actually even in Sussex County pull up the deeds and review the deed. But you want to verify who owns the property. If it's a husband and wife and they own it jointly as tenants by the entireties, then it's going to take 2 signatures to sell it. So we want to make sure we've got the right sellers. Now, what if it's a corporation? We might put here IBM Incorporated or something like that. However many, if we have 2 sellers, like a husband and wife, how many signatures are we going to need on the listing agreement? 2, right. If it's a corporation, who's going to sign a listing agreement?
Whoever's on the article.
Whoever is authorized by the corporation to bind the corporation. Now, sometimes it's the president, sometimes it's the secretary or treasurer. Sometimes you'll need a corporate resolution where they'll actually have a meeting and say so-and-so is authorized to execute these documents. And I don't know that we need to be worried about a corporate resolution, but you want to make sure the person signing has the authority to sign. What you are likely to see in Delaware are LLCs, limited liability corporations. And they're very popular in Delaware, especially for people that own rental properties. I own rental properties, and they're all titled in the name of Beach Plum Ventures LLC. So who signs for an LLC?
The person that's noted as the authorized.
Authorized member. That's the word I'm looking for. Authorized member. So what I would put here, if I were selling one of my rental properties, I put seller's name and mailing address, Beach Plum Ventures LLC. At the end where we sign the agreement, I would sign it, Beach Plum Ventures LLC, comma, and then go down underneath of that and put by, and then I'd sign my name, Bruce E. Plummer, and then I'd put a hyphen or a space and put my title, authorized member. So I've got the seller as the entity, the person signing on behalf of the entity, and then what that person's capacity is. It works the same way in a power of attorney. Let's say my wife had power of attorney for me and was selling a property that we own jointly. So we would put Bruce E. Plummer and Cynthia A. Plummer on this line. That's the seller. When she signs, she'd sign one blank as Cynthia A. Plummer. She'd sign the other blank. She'd sign Bruce E. Plummer by Cynthia A. Plummer, POA, power of attorney.
Bruce, that would be on page 6.
Yes, on the last page where they sign. Yes, yes. So I just want to make sure that we've got the seller and the authorized person to sign on behalf of the seller signing. Yes, I have it so they don't see me. You guys can still hear me, correct?
Yes, we can hear you, Bruce.
Okay, very good. Yeah, I don't have you up on my screen where I can see you, but just speak up if you need to stop me. So we want to identify the entity or the person, and then make sure if it's an artificial entity that we've got the right person signing.
How would you, Mitzi,
Mhm.
how would you identify for a corporation? Would you just ask for articles of incorporation?
You could ask for the articles of
Attorney?
incorporation. Normally, I just say now who's authorized to sign on behalf of this corporation.
Okay,
And they are signing at the end of this document. You'll see there's a statement that says that I am the owner or the authorized representative and have the authority to market it and sell. So they're signing and representing that they have that authority.
okay.
I'm sorry.
Yes.
If you had an irrevocable trust, which I've had.
Okay.
You would, that the seller, that would be.
Yes. So I've got a
Identify the
trust, the
trust.
Bruce E. Plummer and Cynthia A. Plummer trust.
Trust, okay.
And it's got a dated such and such and so forth. So that would be the seller.
Okay.
That's how you would sign the document, or I'd print that out under signature. And then I'd put by, sign my name, have my wife sign her name because we're joint trustees, and then put trustee. So you've got the seller, the person signing in that capacity, and what their capacity is, or signing with that authority and what their capacity is. If you get a estate, so you would put Bruce E. Plummer, estate of, as the seller, and you would sign it, state of Bruce E. Plummer by Cynthia A. Plummer, administratrix or executrix or whatever her capacity was. See how that works? Okay. If you have any questions, just ask me or ask a manager. We're happy to help, but you want to make sure you have the right person so that they have the authority. Now, when I get down to number 3, property description, you have to have a tax parcel number or the property can't be transferred. You can't transfer a piece of property that's not a piece of property recognized by the county. Now, so you'll have a tax, and it's actually, if you look at that number, what that is, it's the map, it's the district, like District 334, map number 1.00, parcel number 101.00. That's what those numbers stand for. You've got the district, map, and parcel number. And after that, let's say it's a condominium, or let's say it's a mobile home on leased land in a mobile home park. You'll have a unit number after that. So you'll have even another set of numbers. Now, if you're selling a piece of property that has not yet been officially subdivided, you don't have a tax ID number yet. You can't transfer it yet, but here's what you do. Say I've got a 20-acre parcel and I want to sell 1 acre off the front of it. So what I put here is I put a portion of tax parcel so-and-so, and then I'd identify it. And what you'll do when you identify it, you would want to make sure that it's clear that the person picking up this document knows where this 1 acre is. Is it on the right side, the left side? Is it in the middle? How deep is it? How wide is it? And what you might say is approximately 1 acre situated on the southeast front corner of the property, being exactly 200 feet wide and running a depth of approximately 220 feet or something like that. Or you could say, is it 212 by 212? Or is it 1 acre exactly? So you want to be in your description, what are you selling? And what I would recommend is I'd say language that says, as shown on the attached Exhibit A. And then I would blow up a copy of the tax parcel from the tax records in the county. And I would put a little dot there and our little red line and show exactly, the width, the depth, and where it is. And I'd attach that to this listing agreement and say, so everybody knows exactly what we're selling, where it's located, exactly how big it is. Are we selling exactly 1 acre? Are we selling a piece of land that's 212 by 212, or 200 by 210, 215, which may be a little more or a little less, more or less than an acre. So everybody good with that? A portion of, and then I'd have an exhibit. Now, if it's not yet subdivided, we're also under special terms. We're going to make a note that this sale is contingent upon the satisfactory subdivision by all proper authorities prior to final settlement. So you're going to have to actually get it subdivided by the county here in Sussex, if it's in Sussex County, get it subdivided and stamped and approved before you transfer it. At that point, they will assign a number to it, tax ID number.
Where would you put the contingency? Where would you recommend?
I'd put that probably under special terms. Or I might even put an addendum. I'd probably put under special terms. The sale is contingent upon the satisfactory subdivision at seller's expense prior to final settlement hereof by all proper authorities. Something to that effect.
And for like Exhibit A, the first example is part.
Exhibit A.
Yeah, would you also then a number, would you also, I know you have your addendums, you're gonna identify that under your.
When we get to
Item 1,
addendums, we would put Exhibit A, and then.
Do you think it hurts under number 25 to also point out that you have an exhibit?
You can.
Okay.
Yeah.
I guess it never hurts to be redundant.
It doesn't hurt to be redundant. You want to be careful though. If you're
Okay.
redundant sometimes, if they're not exactly the same, it can become confusing.
Okay,
Which
I
did you
can see
mean?
that. Okay, all right, got it.
So normally I'm not redundant. I'm just clear.
Okay.
I'd rather be clear one time than redundant and cause
That's
confusion.
very good. That's very important. Yeah.
Bruce,
So, yes,
may I ask a question?
sure.
It's just with the verbiage that you used, if you were attaching an exhibit, how did you reflect that?
I would put a portion of tax parcel 334 1.00, parcel 101.00 as per attached exhibit. And
Okay.
that may not fit on this line, Skip. So you may have to just put on this line, put C addendum number 1. And,
Okay.
and maybe define it there. But I always recommend attaching an exhibit because of when you see it on a piece of paper, it becomes much more clear exactly what you're selling. Now, in some cases, the seller has already had a surveyor come out and survey this off. And so they'll have a preliminary survey that's just not been stamped approved yet. You can attach that. That's perfect. But some cases, they may not have gotten that far yet. They will need a survey and subdivision approval before they can transfer the property. That is a requirement with the county. So if you've actually had the survey done, which in a lot of times you will, I would attach it, say as per the attached exhibit and attach that survey. But make sure you've got a tax ID number or that you've said it's contingent upon getting one, upon final approval. And then you've got the county, Sussex, Kent, Newcastle, whatever. Now, here's what happens where it says, do you have a listing agreement? Beth, you've done this a gazillion times, so I know you know. Under the description, I like to be very, very clear. And I'll tell you why in a little bit. But most people would say further identified as 31436 Point Drive, Lewis, Delaware. All right, mailing address. That's not a legal description. That's a mailing address. In fact, our address, if I ask you where 4157 Highway 1 was, you know where that is? That is today 20184 Coastal Highway. That's our Rehoboth office. Yeah, they changed the street name, the number, and everything. So I do recommend you use the street address because that's an easy way to find it. But in addition to that, if it's in a subdivision, I recommend you use a lot, block, or section number. For instance, the property I'm going to use for illustration is my home. I would put improved as. So this is where it says Delaware and further identified as. I would put improved as or improved parcel number, or let me start over again. Improved lot number 28, block L, Mill Pond Acres, Lewis and Rehoboth 100, Sussex County, Delaware. That's a legal description, lot and block. And in some communities, there's sections. In some communities, there's even phases. Like Rehoboth Beach Yacht and Country Club, there's a gazillion phases. Overbrook Shores has multiple, I think 3 phases. Come on in. How you doing?
Good.
I mean, I also put the subdivision name and the 100 that.
Yep. Yep. So I'd say
I do that.
improved lot L,
Well, you said
28,
improved number,
improved
lot number, blank, block L, subdivision,
in
blank.
improved lot 28,
Right, okay,
block L.
right.
Sometimes they won't have blocks, so
Yeah.
sometimes you might just find an improved lot number. It might not have. a
I
block.
haven't seen that
Yeah.
lot and block.
Lot and block. Or it'll have a section number.
Okay,
But all subdivisions will have a numbering system, and that's recorded in the county, and that's a legal description. So you can find that information. You can find it on, if you pull up the county tax, county records and go to the tax files, it's usually got it on the tax bill. You can also bring up a copy of the deed here in Sussex County and look at the deed. The deed will always have that legal description if there is one.
do you also then go on, but I know your other classes you talked about, you then say being improved lot, blah, 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 like you described. Like
Yes, then I'm going to
Okay,
describe it.
okay.
Now, so let me tell you what I would put if I were listing my house.
Okay.
Tax parcel 3-34-101.00 parcel 1001.00 or something like that. I forget, it's 334 something or other, it's the district in the map. Sussex County being further identified as improved lot 28, block L, Mill Pond Acres, Lewis and Rehoboth 100, Sussex County, Delaware. Being further being identified as 31436 Point Drive, Lewis, Delaware. And improved by, you're not going to fit all this on this line. I
You're
realize
not.
this. No.
I do put AKA.
Also known as, AKA 31436 Point Drive. Being improved by a 4-bedroom, 2.5 bath frame dwelling. Now, why is that important? I bet I never see that on contracts where they put the number of bedrooms. Beth's been around long enough and sold enough properties. I can guarantee you she sold some 4-bedroom homes that when they actually got the septic inspection done, it was a 3-bedroom home, wasn't it? Yeah. People do that all the time. They say, I've got a 4-bedroom home. Maybe they converted a room. Did they get it approved? You can't just call a room a bedroom. There's a process to go through. If you want to finish off a bonus room, first off, to be counted as living space, just like this room we're in right now, to be counted as living space for the building code, you've got to have a minimum ceiling height. You've got to have a minimum square footage. And if it's a hip roof like this, I think that I think the minimum is 7 feet, as I recall, ceiling height has to be present in a certain percentage of the room. There are some stipulations. There also has to be a method of egress other than the door. Now, some people say you have to have a closet. That's not the case in Sussex County. You do not need to have a closet to call it a bedroom. But you must have a window or some other method of escape other than the door. So some people say I'm selling a 6-bedroom house and it's a 2-bedroom house as far as the county is concerned.
And you know, those people may very well have bought from somebody else.
Who told them that?
As a
Yeah.
6-bedroom house. So like when you go to list that house, I do it all the time. If there's any question, DNREC is fabulous. You can call DNREC, ask them if they have a copy of the septic permit on file.
Yep.
They'll email it to you. That way you know what the house was approved for.
Oh, okay. I didn't know that. Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Now, everybody on the call via Google Meet, can you hear that? Did you hear Beth? Somebody needs to unmute and say yes.
No, they didn't hear Beth.
I
You
heard
didn't?
you.
Okay. Yeah.
I
Beth said you
I heard her talking, but I didn't hear everything she said.
Yeah, Beth said
heard
you
her.
could contact DENREC and ask for the septic permit, and they'll provide that information to you. They're very helpful. So, because if it's got a septic system, you're going to have it inspected prior to settlement, unless it qualifies for an extension. And there's only 4 types of sales in Delaware that qualify for an extension, not an exception, but an extension of up to 90 days after settlement. And they are cash sales, sheriff sales, short sales. And I forget the other one off the top of my head. What is it?
The REO.
No, not bank owned. Cash, sheriff, short sale.
State.
No, I forget the 4th one, but there's 4 types of sales that qualify for a 90-day extension. The problem is, if it qualifies for an extension, you still got to get one. And our sales agreement makes the buyer aware of the fact they still got to get one. And it also puts the buyer on notice, once they do get it, if in fact there's a default or a defect, it's now their defect because they're the owners now. Yeah. So you always want to try to get one ahead of time. Yes.
So going back to the building code for like the bedroom.
For a bedroom, or for any room for that
Any
matter,
room.
it's got to have a minimum ceiling height. I think it's 7 feet.
If they just added another converted a room, let's say, or something, made it another room, but they didn't go through the whole legal process and it wasn't does it not count then?
Well, you can't say it's a 4-bedroom house. In that case, it'd be a 3-bedroom. Now, what you can do, you can get it recognized as a 4-bedroom home. There's 2 things you need to worry about. If there's a septic system, you've got to make sure that the septic will accommodate a 4-bedroom home. So you can contact DENREC and they'll have the permit and they'll tell you if the current existing septic, if the home will qualify for a 4-bedroom instead of a 3-bedroom. If there's no septic, if it's on central sewer, not an issue. The second question is you've got to go to the county and get a permit. So you get a build out or a completion permit from the county showing that you converted that room, that unfinished bonus room, to a living space now.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's a 2-step process. 1 step if you're on central sewer. Everybody good? I can't see all the faces of those that are online, but just speak up if you've got a question. So that's identifying the property. We've got the owner, we've got the description, and the reason I say we put 4-bedroom, 2.5 bath, because if they're selling it as a 4-bedroom and we find out it's only a 3, then my buyers better protect it. You misrepresented what you were selling. I'm not getting what I'm bargaining for. It's easier to get out of the agreement of sale. You misrepresented what you were selling. It's not what I bargained for. Now, in section number 4, we talk about inclusions and exclusions. Anything that's attached to the property is a fixture. Fixtures are automatically, per the language in our agreement of sale, automatically included in the sale unless we specifically exclude them. So when I'm reviewing this with a seller, I say, these built-in appliances and built-in cabinets and, things that are attached to the wall and built in, they're fixtures, they have to stay unless we say otherwise. The one that comes up all the time is the dining room chandelier.
Oh, yeah.
We'll talk about that in a second. Well, the thing that people don't think about is it also says here, if you're looking at the screen, it says landscaping Landscaping is a fixture. I've had a lot of times sellers say, oh, well, I want to take this plant out in the backyard, or I can tell you, and I'm not exaggerating now, we have some plants at our home. There's nothing special about them, except that they're sentimental. We've got some irises that came from my old neighbor when I was growing up, Mrs. Henry, and they're beautiful. And we've got some daylilies that came from my wife's grandmother's farm down in Virginia. And we would forego the sale of the property before we would leave those. No, I'm just telling you. So if I want to take that landscaping, I need to make sure I put that language in the contract somewhere. And I would put them in this listing agreement also, that they're excluded from the sale. A lot of people don't think about that.
So that would be under additional exclusions?
I'll show you in a
Oh,
second
sorry.
under
Okay.
additional
Keep going.
exclusions, yes. The other thing is, sometimes when you've got a corner cupboard, you want to check and see, is it attached to the wall? Some of those things are actually built in or screwed into the studs and attached to the wall. Some of them are just furniture sitting there in the corner. If it's just a piece of furniture sitting in the corner, that's personal property. It's not included, unless you say it's included.
Another area that comes up, because so many bathrooms now, they're doing these nice units, they're
Mhm.
not attached.
Yeah,
So if you want to do them.
yep. If it's not physically screwed into the wall and attached, if it's just like a picture or something that's hanging on the wall, that's personal property. So you want to be very careful. I recommend that if there's any questions, you actually go through, pay close attention, and make yourself a list as you're looking at the property. Now, you'll see I've got highlighted next here. It says, if neither column is checked, items should be considered excluded. It's referring to this right here. This box of all the included items that you check yes or no. If you check yes, that means it's included. If you check no, or if you leave it blank, that means it's not included. I recommend you check no, don't leave it blank. I prefer no's, but because that way I know you didn't miss the line. But a no or a blank means no, it's not included. Now,
Hey, Bruce,
yes.
your slide didn't advance.
Oh, all right. Let me bring that back up. Bear with me. And my slide's not advancing now?
I'm
You
still
see-
seeing page 1 of the exclusive right to sell listing agreement,
Okay.
or the top of it, I should say.
Yes. Yeah. Now you're posing a good question for me.
Sorry. That's all right. I have my written
Oh,
copy
hold on.
here,
I
but
think.
When you scroll it down on your computer, it's not scrolling down.
No, when I scroll down on my computer, it's not advancing on theirs. All right, I'll stop presenting and then well, I don't know. I don't think that'll affect you. I'll stop presenting, advance it, and then re-present it.
either that or if everyone has it printed,
Or if
it's not
everyone's
an
got the
issue.
listing agreement in front of you, does everybody have the listing agreement or paper and pencil they can follow along?
I do.
Okay. All right.
But I know you like that to work.
Yeah. So I may play with that again in a second, but if you don't have a listing agreement in front of you, you'll want to make some notes. We are in section number 4, where it talks about inclusions and exclusions. And we've got this box where you check everything that's included or excluded. This box is going to appear at least 3 times throughout the process. It's in the listing agreement, it's in the seller's disclosure, and it's in the agreement of sale. Now, all 3 times the box looks the same. We've made the boxes so they all mirror each other. The box was designed by the Delaware Real Estate Commission. They do the seller's disclosure. So when you complete a listing, the seller completes a seller's disclosure. But it says here in the language, should the seller's disclosure of real property condition report differ from the below list of included items, the below list supersedes. So there's a pecking order, if you would. You've got the seller's disclosure. The listing agreement is what I'm including. It supersedes the seller's disclosure. And then, folks, it says the agreement of sale will be the final list of what's included or excluded. The agreement of sale supersedes everything. I offered it for sale for $500,000 with a washer and dryer. You only paid $480,000, so in the agreement of sale, you don't get the washer and dryer. The agreement of sale supersedes everything. So it's seller's disclosure, listing agreement, agreement of sale. Everybody good with that? Now, under additional inclusions, here's where we're going to list other things that are not pictures and that are not in the above list. Give me an example.
The landscaping, the plants.
Well, we're talking about additional inclusions, not exclusions.
Oh, okay.
Okay. So what else might be included?
Pool table.
Pool table. We can list pool table. Yeah, that's the one I see a lot. I sold a house out at Deerwood, and they sold a lawnmower with it. They were selling a house on acreage and moving into a small little house and didn't need a big riding mower. So I would say riding lawnmower. Although I wouldn't say riding lawnmower, I'd say the 22 horsepower John Deere riding mower.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now you could even put the serial number, but that's probably overkill.
What about like a freezer in the
A
garage?
freezer in the garage. Now, on our added items, it does say kitchen refrigerator with ice maker, refrigerator additional, freezer freestanding. So that's not uncommon to have a refrigerator and or a freezer in the garage or basement. Furniture would be another thing. When you're selling a house at the beach, a lot of times it's a rental property, and so it's being sold furnished. Now, here, you're not going to get all that written in here probably. Sometimes what you'll have agents do, they'll say, being sold furnished as shown on August 21st or something like that. That's sloppy work. What you want to do is be specific. Now, you probably don't want to be as specific as I was when I was a young whippersnapper just starting. I actually went through and counted the knives and the spoons and the forks. And
Oh my gosh.
that I did that on a house on Politown Road one time. And that, that's nuts. But what I would do is probably put being sold furnished as per the attached addendum. Now, we have a furniture addendum,
Right.
and on that furniture addendum, it lists the rooms. And what I do is I go through and I list the included items, the main items that are important to the buyer that they be left. I would probably put like bedroom number 1. I'd put queen bed, nightstand, something like that. Living room, I'd put sofa, two end tables, 2 lamps, television. People saying, oh, we're selling the house furnished. Does that mean you're leaving the TV? I bet 8 out of 10 people I ask, if you're selling it furnished, does that mean you're leaving the TV? And they'll say yes. Well,
I would think the opposite. No.
yeah,
Yeah.
I think no, because you don't buy TVs at furniture stores.
Right.
You buy them at appliance stores or electronic stores.
But I could see why it's important.
Yes, that's why you've got to be specific.
Right.
So the addendum that we have goes room by room, and you can put the highlights, television, 2 nightstands, 2 lamps, 1 sofa, 1 reclining rocker. You don't have to have the brand and all that, but and then you may want to take pictures too.
That's what I would.
But I usually, what I would do is I'd go room by room and list the major items. And then I'd be careful at the end to put, where it says exclusions, I'd put all knickknacks, personal property, including wall hangings, etc. How about pictures? You saw a house furnished. A lot of people think the pictures go with it. Well, they're personal property. I don't know if they're really furniture.
Right. So they aren't, you would like
So-
state.
If a person can't pick up your agreement of sale and look at it and read it and identify and answer those questions, is the wall hanging included or not, then you weren't thorough enough. You need to be clear.
What if you're selling it with all the furniture or furnishings, but the buyer doesn't want all the furnishings?
Well, then the buyer
Just
could
say-
say, all furnishing must be removed at time of settlement.
Okay.
Because our contract says in the fine print that at settlement, the home will be room clean and everything will be removed. So I would emphasize that under additional terms, all furniture will be removed
Okay.
at
Hey,
seller
Bruce.
part of settlement. Yes, Brenda?
Yeah, and we
it's
also
Brenda, right?
have to be, yes, it is.
Okay.
We also have to be very careful with this, when mortgages are involved.
Yes.
And I think one of the verbiages we used was being sold furnished at convenience to buyer and seller, but
Correct.
has no value. See
Correct.
attached list.
See,
And
lenders don't want to finance
No.
furniture.
that's right, that's right. And it can cause issues.
Yes.
So,
So
you gotta
if
have the
you're
right
selling
verbiage.
a house fully furnished, you got two things you can do. You can use, as Brenda said, in the language, I'd say excluding knickknacks and personal property, because even homes that are sold furnished, some things are being removed, personal
Right,
property
right.
items. And I'd say including all pots, pans, silverware, cooking utensils in the kitchen area as well. I wouldn't itemize one toaster, one blender, but I'd say all pots, pans, appliances, and cooking utensils in the kitchen, and maybe take a picture. But then I'd say all these items are included as a convenience to the parties and add no value to the transaction.
I don't put that in my listing agreement. I just put that in.
Yeah, I would put that in the sales agreement.
Yeah.
I don't know if you need it in the listing agreement. That's a good point, Beth. But in the sales agreement, you want to do that.
So
So
you
it
would
adds no
do-
value
You would, okay, where would you put that in sales agreement?
under special terms or under a
Under-
furniture
okay.
addendum.
So all of these items are added.
I put it I think I put it up there where it says in the inclusion line
Okay,
in the agreement of sale. I
You
think
could do
it's
that
like
too.
the second page, because it has exclusions and then it has inclusions, and I normally put it right in there.
So you're saying all of these items are added.
they're included as a convenience to
As
the
convenience,
seller
okay.
or a convenience to the parties and add no value to the transaction.
Okay.
Now, some banks aren't going to buy that language.
Right.
Yeah.
In that case, you may have to remove that from the agreement of sale. But I know we're talking about the listing agreement now, but while we're talking about that, we'll mention it. But the buyer only wants it if it comes with the furniture. So what you do is you write a contract for the house, and then you do a bill of sale for the furniture.
Okay.
And the bill of sale would say what's being sold, and you could put $1, $100, or whatever you want. It's a separate document outside the sales agreement, but you want to be careful. And we have one, I think, in our dot loop. It says the bill of sale is only valid or only good if they settle on the real estate. Otherwise, you don't get the furniture for $1.
Right.
Okay.
And this would only be like if the home's having a mortgage on it.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. If it's cash sale, it doesn't matter. But lenders don't want to finance furniture. As Beth said, you don't need all that language in the listing agreement, but you need to think about that in your agreement of sale. Now, you also, in the listing agreement, if you're excluding the dining room chandelier, you would put that here under additional exclusions. I would put that the dining room chandelier will be removed at seller's expense prior to settlement and is excluded from the sale, something like that. The question comes up, that is not clear enough for an agreement of sale. It might be clear enough for this listing agreement, but in the agreement of sale, my question would be, okay, the chandelier is removed. What am I going to see when I walk through on my walkthrough? Is there going to be a replacement? Is there going to be a credit? Is there going to be bare wire sticking out of the ceiling? Is it going to have wire nuts on it pushed up in the box with a cap over it? You'd want to be specific in that case. When we talk about the sales agreement next time, we'll go over that.
I know like the other things, like the pots and pans, the gourmet wraps. I know stories where people, those have been removed. They didn't know they were taking them out, and it's huge gash in the ceiling, and they thought they were getting them and all that.
You want to be clear, specific. Otherwise, you may end up buying something. I have one time bought a washing machine. I never had to do that again. I learned my lesson. A lot of agents have been around a while, have bought something here or there over the years. Once. Shame on you if it's twice. All right. I almost had to put air conditioning in the house once.
Oh my gosh.
Wow. My first transaction, I had to buy it, pay for a roof.
Had to pay for a roof. Yeah.
Part of it, I think the company picked up the only because It was a townhome down in Dewey.
Mhm.
And I was brand spanking new. I was working under my mom when she was away on vacation. Tara Millman was helping me, and the market was hot.
Uh-huh.
You know, you're trying to make the contracts as clean as you could, and didn't pick up that the roofs were the responsibility
Of the owner? Yeah.
It was actually a townhome, not a condo,
Gotcha.
which just for everybody, the
Oh.
newbies.
Can everybody hear this? Important note.
When
Beth
you
making.
look in the tax records, like say, the great example is plantations.
Mhm.
If it's a condo, there'll be 4 units.
Oh, yeah.
If it's a townhome, or 4 numbers. If it's-
District map parcel unit.
If it's a townhome, there will be 3 numbers.
District map parcel, period.
And check, because the owners very well are probably responsible for it, like the roof of the property. So, and my
Yep.
buyer had a home inspection and needed a new roof. My
Some
very-
townhouses are
very-
fee simple.
right out of the gate, my
individual
very first
unit.
one.
Some of them are condominium
Mine's,
ownership.
mine's condo right down here. And our HOA fees are a little higher, and I have to explain to people why,
Mhm.
because our insurance is more because it's a condo.
It's 4 numbers. Look,
Yeah.
Yep,
it's
4 numbers.
4 or 3. It's
What's
3,
the 4?
it's 3.
Four
If
is the
there's
condo.
4, it's gonna be a condo.
The 4th number is your unit number.
If it's 3, it's gonna be a townhome, and more than likely, they have the responsibility of like the roof.
Yep.
So.
Good comment.
That's the
Okay,
tax
right
record.
there.
And then you can actually like get a survey for it sometimes too.
Yep.
Hey, Bruce,
Yes, Skip, go ahead.
Tax record.
Beth said something, and I know that she was referring to the market was hot. Terry Millman was helping her, but I did not hear what it was that she was distinguishing.
She
Well,
sold,
I think what we did.
can you hear her now? Go
I'm-
ahead, Beth.
I'm thinking, Skip, that maybe we didn't do a home inspection. And then it came up that the property needed a new, we didn't do a home inspection. I was thinking it was a condo, because like I said, I was a newbie. And, then they found out it needed a new roof, and the buyers came back to me, and I had to end up paying for it, the roof.
Yeah, it was sold with the representation or thinking that the condo would be responsible
Yeah.
for the roof, when in fact it wasn't condo ownership.
Yeah,
And the owner of the property was responsible for the roof.
Okay,
Now, and condominium is not a building type. Condominium is a ownership type. Let me show you where this will throw you. Nassau Grove, single family detached homes, right? Condominium ownership. Did you know that? That's
No,
a
I did not know
condominium
that about
ownership.
Nassau Grove.
Each one of those detached single family homes is a unit in a condominium. Yep. And you can tell that, as Beth says, there'll be a 4th number, a unit number. So it's a form of ownership, not a type of building.
and then even though like Arbor Lynn,
Mhm.
it's a condominium form of ownership. The land is condominiumized,
Mhm.
but the house itself, the owners are responsible. And again, you go back to wanting to see three
Yep.
numbers. And the reason that the developers do that is because when they condominiumize land, they can put more units. That's why they do that.
Land lease. Okay. I'm sorry.
Now, Lewis Beach, the question was about land lease. All Lewis Beach is land lease.
That I found out.
Yeah, 99 years, right to renew for 99 more. Most of them have, anywhere 10, 20, 30 years on the first term. Some of them have already renewed. But here's the thing. Suppose you, in that case, what you would do in the description, you'd put remaining leasehold interest in 324, because that's what you're selling. You're not selling remaining leasehold interest in 324 Mulberry Street or something like that. You're not selling the land, you're selling the remaining leasehold interest.
And you would do that in the property description on the.
I would, yeah, same
Okay,
thing.
that's my other question. Okay.
Yep.
Okay. That would be in the listing agreement, right?
Mhm.
Yes, and the sales agreement. Now, there is a place later on where you can check in fee simple or condo or leasehold, but I would put it in the description as well, remaining leasehold interest. Because
Okay,
what
thank
you're
you.
selling is what's left of the lease.
And
Now,
that's
here's,
unusual for a lot of people moving here. They're not used.
they're
to-
not used
you
to
know, They
that.
haven't been in Baltimore or.
They would have no clue that that's the way Lewis, who owns the city or who owns the Lewis Beach?
Is it
The city commissioners of Lewis.
Okay.
Yep. Now, what will happen after the end of the second 99-year term? Who knows? We won't be here to find out. So,
We'll be in heaven with them.
Yeah.
Oh, look what they're doing.
Now, here's what you need to think about though. Let's say you're listing a house on Lewis Beach and you're selling the remaining leasehold interest and there's 15 years left on the first 99-year term. Can you get a 30-year mortgage? No, you can't get a 30-year mortgage if you only own 15 years. So you could get a 15-year mortgage. Or here's what you do. You go to the city and tell them you want to exercise your right to renew because the way the leases are written, it's 99 years and the tenant has the right and privilege to automatically renew for another 99. Same terms and conditions, they just renew for another 99. But the problem is they're not able to give that notice per the original leases until the last year of the lease.
Right.
So you got to wait till the last year. Well, the city realized many years ago, probably 20 years ago, that that was becoming a problem. So you can go to them, even though you got 20 years left and the lease says you can't renew it till the last year. If you go to them and ask to renew it, they will renew it and record that. And so now you've got 20 plus 99 and you can go get your 30-year mortgage.
So
But you have to go to the city and get them to approve it.
The seller would do that.
The seller would do that.
So
yes.
you would potentially consult with your seller that you might want to do, advise them if it was. a
Yeah.
very
How much
short-
longer do you have on your lease? I think we need to go ahead and
Right.
contact the city and renew it.
Sellers have no idea.
They don't. They don't. In fact, a lot of those old leases are handwritten on Lewis Beach. They're very difficult to read.
Yes, okay, so similarly, like over in Cottonets, like if they only have like, let's say 8 years left,
Mhm.
and the people are applying for, would that also apply to the same situation?
Yes, you can only sell what you have a right to. So if
Okay.
they have an 8-year lease left in Potnets, let's say it's a 20-year lease at Baywoods or something.
Okay, right.
I think they do 20, I think they do 99 now too, don't they? They do a long term so you can get a mortgage now too.
But they would agree,
You would want to make sure you exercise that right or got that authority
okay.
so that you could convey that and therefore the buyer could get a
That's very
long-term
good. I
mortgage.
did not know that. Thank you.
That's Lewis. How about in Dewey?
There is a section in Dewey Beach that's the same thing, and some of those only have a year or 2 or 3 left.
Yep.
And after those, there's no renewal, unless you want to pay a fortune or buy it and pay a fortune. It's owned by the Redford family, Rehoboth by the Sea.
Really?
Yeah. So if you see something in the ocean block at Dewey Beach for 200,000, you'll know it's got a year left.
Even that. I mean, even the ones that have, you're paying you can be paying $1.7 million
Right.
for a house and have a 45-year lease that you're paying $25,000 a year
Yeah.
for the ground.
Really
Now, people
important that
say,
people understand.
who would pay
A lot of
$20,000
people do it.
to buy a property when you're only who would pay 200,000 to buy a property and you only got 3 years left on the lease? Well, I would if I can rent it for 100,000 a year.
But you won't find any of those 200.
Yeah, you won't. You won't
They're
anymore. You
gone.
used
They're
to.
all gone.
Yeah, you used to find them.
Gone.
People all think that though. They call you up, oh, looking for a little place by the shore, a little fixer
fixer
up, just a
upper.
little fixer up.
Yeah.
Fixer up.
Here's a house in Harrington.
$200,000.
I've had people.
Then they get all mad at you when you try to tell them.
Have you been here?
No, they think it's like a
They haven't even.
little
yeah.
cottage.
Okay.
But now,
Yes. Question.
it'll come back.
All right. Everybody good so
A lot
far?
of stuff.
I know we've spent a little more time on that, but those are where questions come up on identifying the property and the leasehold interest and that kind of stuff. Now, let me see, try again, get my screen up. Do you guys that are on the call via Google, do you want me to sign off, advance my screen and sign back on with the advanced screen? Or are you okay? Everybody's muted.
Bruce, I can see you okay.
Okay.
I'm okay. I have the printed document in front of me, so.
What's the thing, Bruce? See that blue squiggly with the dot? I know.
blue squiggly with the dot. Up
Well,
top or
Make that little box go way up, popped up, because it's right on that.
On
Like,
that?
what's that there?
everyone can see your annotations.
Oh, okay. Steve would have gone in, he could probably tell you guys.
Folks, I'm just not as familiar with the Google Meet as I am with Zoom, so bear with me. Here we go. If you can't see it, I'm on section number 5, rental/lease. Now, there's an A and a B on this. A talks about the property is or is not subject to a tenant rental lease. That would be if it is a person occupying or going to occupy the property. That talks about occupancy, where B talks more about is there some contractual relationship that runs with the property, like maybe the leases of solar panels. And we'll talk about that in a second. So in A, it says that the property is or is not subject to a rental/lease agreement. So I might be selling a property today on Lewis Beach that goes to settlement in October, and you may say, well, I don't have to worry about that. Well, you need to check. Maybe they've already rented or booked 10 weeks for next summer, 2025. And those leases would run with the property. So you've got to be real careful on rental properties. You know, are there any future leases that you've committed to? Because they will run with the property unless we by mutual agreement can buy them out or relocate them, which maybe you can, maybe you can't. It may cost you some money to do that, even if you can. It says, now what happens if there are leases? The seller assigns the leases that are future leases. The seller transfers the security deposit, because remember, when it settles, the buyer will be the new owner. So when a tenant moves out, if there's a security deposit, it's the new owner that's got to pay it back. So you transfer the security deposit at settlement. And it just goes into more detail here about how you handle those type of properties where you're selling a property that's been rented. Now, there's another class I do, and maybe we'll do that maybe in a month or 2 or 3 on selling properties with leases. That's a whole class in and of itself. You've got to worry about first right of refusals, right of automatic right of renewals, all that kind of stuff, especially on commercial properties. So we can do that sometime. All right. And it says the seller will cooperate, provide the information to the listing office and the prospective buyer so they know what it's being leased for. Wouldn't you want to know, if I'm buying your house and I'm inheriting your tenant, I'd want a copy of the lease. I want to know what I'm getting into. Are they current? You know, when does the lease end? Let's say, oh, the lease ends on September 30th. Well, then my question is, have you given official notice that you're not renewing? If it's a year-round lease and I'm selling the house and say, oh, the lease is up September, so you don't have to worry about it. Oh, yes, you do have to worry about it. Under Delaware law, year-round leases are any lease that's subject to the landlord tenant code, which is 120 days or more. Those types of leases automatically renew unless you give 60 days advance notice, a minimum of 60 days advance notice in writing.
From the first of the month.
Yeah, 60 days, and the notice starts 60 days after the first day of the month after the notice is given. So if I give notice on September 1st, I don't think the notice starts till October 1st. If I want them out by the end of September, I want to be giving notice probably August, July, probably around the 15th or 25th, sometime in there of June. Because the 60 days notice starts the first day of the month after it's given. The other thing is you have to give, send that notice in writing. A lot of people give notice verbally. That means nothing. They'll go down and they'll tape a note on the door. That means nothing. Under Delaware Landlord Tenant Code law, you have notices given by giving certificate of mailing, certified return receipt mailing, or hand delivered to an adult who resides at the residence. Hand delivered, it must be an adult who resides at the residence.
Were they initial?
Yes, I would get them to acknowledge delivery if I could. If they won't, then I would make a note or take a picture or do something, but I would try to get them to acknowledge delivery. Otherwise, the buyer is buying that property thinking they're moving in on October 1st, and folks, they're not, or they may not be if the tenant doesn't own the lease. Because at that point, that tenant, it automatically renews and it becomes a month-to-month holdover lease, which then requires 60 days notice from the first day of the month after the notice is given. You could be the first of the year getting in.
Would you, excuse me, would you attach or do anywhere else in this, are you going to make note that there is, if you do have a rental agreement, let's say, would you attach it as an addendum? Would you?
Probably what I would do is you may have a year-round rental. I probably wouldn't attach it, but I'd get a copy of it and probably scan it into the MLS or have it available that we could provide it to the buyer.
Okay, I see, okay.
Yeah. They're going to want to see what they're getting into.
Like
Same
under
thing.
seller docs? Would you upload it under seller docs?
Yeah, you could put it under
Okay, so you
seller
could
doc.
Put it there under disclosure. Oh, yeah, okay.
Yeah,
got it,
you could
okay.
do that. Now, if the seller doesn't want to make it publicly
That's what I would-
available,
yeah.
they could say, just provide it, when we
As
get a
per
prospective
okay.
buyer. Suppose you're selling a 30-acre piece of land, and suppose there's a farmer farming it. Do you realize that farm leases, even verbal ones are considered to end on December 31st. Farm leases, the farmer has the right to come on and get his crop. Farm leases automatically renew if you don't give notice. They automatically renew January 1st, a verbal farm lease, unless you've given notice by, I think it's September 31st. September 30th, 30 days in September.
So you can sell one.
And I would check that,
It's-
but farm, you need to be careful with farm leases, because you sell a 200-acre farm to Shell Brothers to develop. Well, if the farmer's got a lease on there, Shell's not going to get there and start putting roads in until that lease is up. And if that lease automatically renews, if they didn't give notice or they give it too late, that farmer's got another year. Somebody's in big trouble.
Yeah.
Okay. That happened.
Yeah, the other thing that happens while I'm thinking of it, in case I forget it when we're talking about the agreement of sale, farms are generally in Sussex County taxed as farms. They don't pay as much taxes. If you sell a 30-acre farm that's being taxed as a farm, and then they turn around and sell it, and it's sold at a higher price for development, and the developer wants to develop it, now the county said, oh, wait a minute, we're going to take away all those discounts you've had over the last, I think it's 10 years. We want all that money back. They're called rollback taxes.
Wow.
Somebody's got to pay that. Our agreement of sale, I think, says the seller does, as I recall.
Are farms AR1?
AR1.
Okay.
Now, it doesn't have to be AR1 to be farm, but AR1 is for farmland,
Okay.
AR1,
So
AR2.
like land in general is
General AR1, that's the
Okay.
most common zone, yeah. Yeah, farms are allowed in AR districts. B, property is or is not subject to third-party rental lease agreements. Now, what you're going to see here a lot are going to be your fuel tank leases. If you bury a LPG gas tank in the ground, you generally have to, unless you buy the tank, you generally have to lease the tank from the service that provides your gas, and you have to sign a long-term agreement to use them for your gas. Usually it's 5 to 10 years at least. And that runs with the property. So if I sold my home, I've got a buried gas tank at my house. If I sold my home, the new owner has to continue to get gas from Baker Petroleum. Unless there's language there where I can buy them out or they can switch tanks and all, but that's a contractual relationship that runs with the property.
And that could be in a development, so. if the
It could
development
be.
owns the LP,
Yep.
then it could be part of
Plantations has their own gas system, bottled gas.
that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right, a lot of like Eco Point near me, they just convert over to natural gas.
Yes.
there.
Mhm.
But like the same situation, so you would not attach anything like, if you have like, let's say a third party agreement, you wouldn't attach anything.
I probably wouldn't attach that to this. I'll tell you what you would want to get a copy of though, probably. I would get the fuel storage tank agreement.
Okay,
If I had solar panel leases, I would definitely get a copy of that.
okay,
Solar panel leases are generally for 20 to 30 years. And they are very expensive if you put them up and 1 year later go to sell the property. You've either got to assign that lease to the new buyer, or that buyer may have to pay for them, or the seller may have to pay for them, and it's expensive. So I know the last one I did was a solar panel. It was Tesla was the company. And it's very easy to work with. You contact them, you can do it all online. And you have to have the person, the buyer's name, social security number, and all that kind of stuff. And they'll do a credit check and all, and then they'll do an assignment. But you have to assign the solar panel lease in order for the seller to get out of that lease and be released. And the new buyer takes it over.
We'll start to see, or probably already have started to see the charging, the big battery charging stations at the house.
Mhm.
That would be another one.
Under Delaware law now, all new construction must have not a charging station, but they must have the facilities at the electric panel, either in the garage or outside, that you can have a charging station. All new construction as of January of this year, I think, of this past year.
Oh, past year, January, okay.
So it may not have a charging
How that
station,
would
but
affect,
it's,
like, condo,
I don't know if it affects condos or not.
just-
Yeah, I don't know that.
Yeah.
But when you go and get your permit, that's one of the things they'll look for now, at the county. Actually, that's a statewide, law.
When did that come into effect?
I think January of 24.
Oh, okay.
Just like now, if you sell a property, and a lot of these things you have to do, they're pre-printed into fine print. So if you forget them, at least we've got them in the document. Like all new home builders today, when they enter into a contract to build a home, they must include language that says, hey, you can get sprinkler systems in your house for an additional cost.
Oh, okay.
In fact, in the
It's not
city of Lewis,
required.
not required you have it, but in the city of, you have to have a disclosure, but you don't have to have the sprinkler system. City of Lewis, you must have a sprinkler system. The city of Lewis, as of about a year ago, I think Milton and Rehoboth may have done the same thing. In the city limits, all new construction and all new major renovation must include residential sprinkler systems.
Well, I noticed like the condos down here, like I used to live at Painter's Mill and then I had this condo with COVID. They have sprinklers in them all, right? Is
Yeah,
that-
they weren't, I don't know if they were required at that time. They may have been
But
under
it's nice that
condo
they
under state
Yeah,
fire marshal
like a-
office, yeah.
is a thing.
But in the city, even in the city of Lewis, even a single family residential must now have a sprinkler system. If you were to get a building permit today. And I'm pretty sure Milton did it, and I think Rehoboth was talking about it. Lewis was the first in the area, in the county that I'm aware of. All right, so that's what we're talking about there. Those long-term relationships or contractual agreements that we need to disclose or get assignments for. Then we get to 6, listing price. It's the only price we can quote without written authority. We get to 7, possession. Always talk to your seller when you're listing the property about this. Possession. Possession is conveyed at time of settlement. I've had sellers more times than you can imagine who think, hey, I go to settlement, I get the money, then I'll come back and clear everything out. Does not work that way. You must be out at settlement. They hand you the money, you hand them a deed and a key. And they say, well, what if I move out and the sale falls through? That's the risk of selling a home. That's the way it works. Unless you want a post-settlement occupancy agreement, and you don't see those very often. Occasionally you do, but not very often.
That'd be like a red flag.
Yeah, they could rent it back, or maybe it's just for 2 days rent free or something like that. We sold a house down at Bay Colony once, or a condo, and the people would, was it you, Beth? The people would only sell it if they could have, if the buyer wanted to settle one day, like the end of summer, but the seller said, no, I've got this weekend family plans and we're not going to move until the 3rd of September. But they had the commitment for financing expired at the end of August or something like that. So we worked out a post-settlement 3-day occupancy.
I did have one where the seller somehow didn't know that he had to be out the day of settlement. And the night before at 6 o'clock, when I'm talking to him to ask how the moving's going. And he goes, okay, we're getting it done. We're
Yeah.
getting settlement at 10 o'clock the next morning. And
Yeah.
I said, you're gonna get it all, you'll have everything out by the morning because buyers come to do the work. What do you mean have it all out? Like,
Yeah.
you have to be out. And
Yeah.
And he just went blank on the other end. He goes, what am I gonna do?
I've had it happen.
I said, get on the phone and call U-Haul.
Yeah.
See if you can get a U-Haul, like tonight, if
Yeah.
you can. Those poor guys worked all night long,
Mm.
through the night,
Oh, my God.
loading up the truck. I came over in the morning with a pickup truck and friends came over with trucks and we got them out. But it was, oh my
Yep,
gosh.
I've had it happen. It's not that uncommon. Now, it says it in our agreement of sale, and I always point it out when I'm presenting the offer, but I also always point that particular term out when I'm going over the listing. There's certain things in here that, you know, they're not necessarily more important, but they're things I emphasize as I'm
Right,
going through this
right.
because I've seen them.
They
Big
can cause a
problem.
big wrinkle.
Oh my gosh.
Now, expiration date, section number 8, that's when we're going to put our expiration. Now, you can put any date in there you want, but if you're looking for a company policy, normally we put a year. So if I were listing a house today, I'd probably have it listed till maybe August 30th of 2025.
I never knew that.
Yeah. Now, some people say, oh, I don't want to commit for a year. Well, you're really not. All we're saying is if it's not sold and you haven't canceled, it'll automatically end in and of itself on this date. You can put a shorter date if they want 6 months or 4 months, but if they only want 2 months or something, why?
Right.
You know, we've got to have a reasonable chance to recapture and sell the property and get paid for our time. So we need a reasonable time to do that. We normally put a year.
Somebody mentioned to me, like, I mentioned a year, and this is another agent, and they
Mhm.
said, oh, but what if you don't like the people? What if it's about nature?
Okay, so then we go on.
Okay.
Expiration, this is, I tell sellers, this is when it drops dead in and of itself. You know, if nothing happens, it'll automatically be over in and of itself with no notice or anything. But you can cancel under section 9 at any time, blank days, a written notice after blank days from effective date. Now, here's what I normally would put. Anytime you want, you can give 30 days notice after 120 days. So 30 after 120, you've committed yourself only to 150 days. I think that's ideal. Now, would I be agreeable to 30 after 90? Yes, I'd be agreeable to that too. In fact, Skip often puts 1 day's notice after 1 day from the effective date. And I'm okay with that. If you're okay with it, because what you're saying is they can give you 1 day's notice anytime and cancel, period. No questions asked. And after all, Coldwell Banker has a written guarantee. I don't know that people use it much anymore, but it's, you know, if we don't do what we say we're going to do and we can't make you happy after you talk to the manager within 24 hours, you can cancel your agreement. You know, we guarantee our services. We don't guarantee you we'll sell your house, but we guarantee you we'll do all these things. And if we don't, you can fire us. Our work's guaranteed.
Do we have that printed out somewhere?
Somewhere, I don't know if it's in dotloop, but we do have that. I've got it on my computer, on this computer somewhere. It's like 22 points or something like that. The things that we will have an open house. We'll discuss the net proceeds.
Oh,
We'll do
yeah,
this, we'll
I
do that.
wanna do that.
And it actually at the bottom, it's signed and it says, if we don't do this, you contact the manager. If it can't be corrected to your satisfaction, you can terminate the listing agreement with 1 day's notice. No questions asked. So we can tell people we guarantee our services. I think that's a pretty powerful statement. I guarantee you'll be happy. That's what I tell sellers. I guarantee you'll be happy, or you can cancel. That's your remedy.
Right.
Who wants a client who's not happy with you?
Right.
We don't want them. Let them go. All right. So we've got cancellation 1 day after 1 day. Normally I recommend 30 after 90 or 30 after 120. I usually do 30 after 120. That's a standard good default. Everybody good there? Now, here's where it gets exciting. Here's why Beth's here, I'm sure.
Oh, well, we should all know this by now.
Yeah. We're talking about listing broker compensation. So I would say, you know, all of our documents contain a statement, and you'll see it here. It says compensation seller acknowledges, and it just goes on and says commissions are negotiable. They're not set by law or by the MLS or no standard commission. I just paraphrased that for you, but that's what that says. Okay. You'll see that in all of our documents now. Now, here's what we charge. 10A, listing broker commission. I just say, we're going to charge you. Now, let's say I usually charge 5% because I don't usually work with sellers unless they're friends or past clients or something like that. You may charge 6%. Now, I'm going to use by way of example 5%. So I'd put, because normally we charge 5 or 6%. You can't really deviate from those numbers without talking with management. So I'm going to put seller agrees to pay listing broker compensation of 2.5% of the gross listing or selling price, 2.5% of the gross selling price. Do not put 2.5 there, put 2.5%. If you use 3, right on that blank line, 10A, first blank line, seller agrees to pay listing broker compensation of 2.5%.
So you want to spell it out. You want to literally put the
Well,
/0.
I would probably put 2.5.
Okay.
You could put 2, 1/2, 2.5. You could spell it out. I used put 2.5%. What you want to spell out is percent.
Or you do
The
spell
word
percent.
percent?
No, you want to put the percent mark,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. 2.5 and then the percent symbol. Because if you just put 2.5, a smart aleck seller could say, oh, is that percent of the gross selling price or is that a flat fee? Because you haven't identified which one of the two it is. Is it a percentage or is it a flat dollar amount? $2.5.
Bruce, in the agreement, it shows in parentheses percentage of the gross selling amount or a flat fee.
Correct. And so which is it? Is it a flat fee? If you put in there 3, is it $3? I mean,
Okay.
I don't think you're going to have trouble with that, but I always caution put the percentage symbol.
Okay.
Because really, what it's asking is you've got 2 choices there. Now you can charge a flat fee. And maybe you're selling a mobile home for $7,000. We sold a lot one time, not too many years ago, for like $4,000. Our minimum fee was $2,500. And so we put in there $2,500. And the seller was happy to pay it because they got rid of the lot. We sold it to the neighbor. All right. It was just a little sliver of land. It was probably wetlands or something. And they were happy to get rid of it. But we don't work for less than $2,500 because, in fact, it's probably $3,000 now. You may even have a higher minimum because of the liability and the workload that we take on when we step into the transaction. So you can charge a flat fee. I suspect on high-end properties, you're going to start to see more people start to try to negotiate this to a flat fee. Like a $4 million home, they may just say, hey, I'll pay you $75,000. I'm not paying 3% of $4 million or something like that. If I were a seller, I might try to do that too. I think that's not unreasonable. Depends on what services you're providing. Then it goes on, it says plus blank for services rendered. That blank, that second blank is if you have an administrative fee. Right now, Coldwell Banker does not charge an admin fee, Coldwell Banker Premier. There's at least one agent in the firm that does. I think Coldwell Banker Premier may start charging a fee in the future, particularly as they start to put more and more pressure on compensation through buyers negotiating and things like that.
And that's one more thing for a buyer.
Yes.
I think it's just crazy.
No, the seller's going to pay for it.
All right, okay, but is this going to work? Both sides will charge it.
I don't know if they're going to
Buyer,
charge it to the buyer, and I don't know if they're going to do it at all, but Coldwell Banker Premier does do it in the surrounding market in all their other offices. In Delaware right now, they don't. But I've been told by Steve that that's very likely that we may do that in the near future. We would charge the seller maybe 2.5% plus maybe like $495 or $295. I'll tell you that the standard admin fee now is about $495, $500, somewhere in that area.
But that goes all to the company, right? The agents get.
Depends on what company policy is. Yeah.
Do we have a list of like our competition that does that? Right now?
Who charges? I know Coldwell Banker Realty charges. Keller Williams charges. Yeah.
Okay.
It's,
I mean,
it's not uncommon, and they say they have no problem collecting.
And I think company charges, although Compass always used to give less to selling agent than they took.
Yeah.
They would take
So some of our competitors in this market are doing it now.
Maryland did it.
Yeah.
Maryland was doing it.
Yeah, it's part of the standard form. You can see people asked for it when we did the form.
But I mean, it's really good to know because then you know your competition and you know what you're going against when you're in a listing presentation.
So someday in the future, we may charge an administrative fee. If we do, that's where it would go. If we do charge it, maybe they'll waive it if people question it or it becomes an obstacle. But that's where it will go. That's what that line's intended for. That's
I just been leaving that blank right now.
right now. You could leave it blank or you could put a 0. Right now, we don't charge except for I know there's one agent that does, and the company is authorized
I
that.
mean, really, when you're paying you know, $500-600 for photos to get a house photographed. I this agent tell where some of their
I know.
advertising
I'll
costs.
tell you another thing that,
I agree.
with virtual tours and drone photography and professional photography and all this stuff, advertising and things sellers want, you might have a addendum attached to this that says the seller's going to pay for that. Or if the property doesn't sell, that the seller agrees to reimburse you or something to that effect. If you go out of pocket, you know, like on a large community like Love Creek, you go out of pocket tens of thousands of dollars, you're going to want some kind of protection in case those units
And
don't
that's
sell.
where you gotta be careful with not making the listing too short
Mm-hmm.
because of the, you know, it's those initial costs that really
Yeah.
get
They
you.
do.
Going in.
Yeah, I have a look at that, this condo. Yeah, my seller's very unreasonable. So
Okay. But that second line is where you put that.
Unreasonable.
So I would tell the seller, now we're going to charge you 2.5%. Now you say 2.5%. I thought it'd be 5 or 6%. Well, we're going to charge you 2.5%, but there's two sides to every transaction. There's the listing side, there's the selling side. Right now, we're not going to talk about the selling side because we don't know what it's going to be. I'm just going to tell you that it's not uncommon. The rules all changed on August 17th nationwide. So we charge 2.5% to represent you as a seller. The buyer is now going to have a buyer agency agreement with their agent in writing. And that agreement's going to say what that buyer's agent's going to get paid. The neat thing about that from a buyer perspective is the buyer gets to negotiate it and they might get a better deal. Now, bear in mind, after that number is negotiated, do not be surprised. In fact, I'm going to caution you, be prepared for the buyer to say, we want you to pay our agent's fee as well. So we charge 2.5. Maybe the buyer's agent negotiated 2.5. Don't be surprised if the offer says you'll have to pay their 2.5% too. It's no different than the 5% you used to pay years ago. You know, it's still 5%, 6%. But at least this way, the buyer has negotiated a fee. And Mr. Seller, that's probably in your best interest because the buyer's going to try and negotiate a fee down. The other thing is you're not committing yourself and you're not putting all your cards on the table. You're not saying you'll pay 2.5% to the other side when maybe they can only negotiate 2%. So you've not revealed your cards or given money away that you don't have to give away. We want 2.5. Be prepared to pay a buyer's agent whatever they've negotiated. You're not committing yourself to that in this. You're just being prepared for it. And when it comes, we'll talk about it at that time and you can agree, not agree, counter, or whatever. But it's not uncommon. Be prepared for it. Probably between 2 and 3% would be conformed. That's what I tell them. In fact, you'll see here under B, it says seller acknowledges that offering compensation to a buyer's broker is not required by law. Buyer broker compensation may be discussed during negotiations at the time the offer from a buyer is received. So that's when we'll be talking about that. Now, then I go on to the second paragraph of 10A. I'd say seller acknowledges that buyer may choose to be unrepresented. What if we get a buyer? I already told you, if the buyer's got an agent representing them, they've got to enter into a written agreement and it'll say what they get paid. What if that buyer says, I don't want representation and I'm not signing anything, but I still want to buy this house? Well, suppose it's my listing, and I always say, suppose it's my listing, and let's say Beth has that buyer.
Mm-hmm.
Beth's not going to sell your property for zero,
Right.
nor would I. The other side of somebody's got to prepare the offer. Somebody's got to negotiate that offer. Somebody's got to make photocopies and deliver to that person. Somebody's got to show that property. Somebody's got to do all the things that a buyer's agent would normally do, except for give advice. If the buyer's unrepresented, we do not give them advice or counsel. We just answer their questions, but we still got to prepare the document. We've got to explain the document and answer their questions, reveal factual information. Somebody's doing all of that work, and they need to be paid, or else they're not going to do it. So if the buyer happens to choose to be unrepresented, unlikely to happen, but it could, then you're saying that there would be an additional fee of 2.5% more. So there's your 5% that you're used to. Okay. So let's say it's my listing and Beth got a buyer who's unrepresented. They will not sign a buyer agency agreement. They're a customer, not a client. Beth can still sell the property. I'll represent you. She'll put the deal together for the buyer. She's not a buyer's agent, but she's doing all those things that a buyer's agent typically does other than advice and counsel. And she'll get the other 2.5, that side
She
transaction.
has to negotiate that 2.5 with that buyer though.
Well,
That's-
not if that buyer's unrepresented. Now, if the buyer's represented, this does not apply. Because if the buyer signs a representation agreement, then that agreement will say what Beth's side's getting paid.
Well, how's Beth getting paid if the buyer's unrepresented and doesn't agree to pay? She's getting her seller.
She's getting this second section here,
I see.
if they're unrepresented.
So that could be any.
Let's say it's my listing and Beth's selling it.
Right.
I'm getting the 2.5 my side.
Yeah.
Beth's side, if she's working for a buyer as a buyer's agent, she will have a buyer agency agreement and she'll get paid whatever that agreement says. But if they will not sign an agreement and refuse representation and say, I want to be a customer only, I'll represent myself.
Okay.
Now, what's she going to get paid? Nothing,
Nothing.
except we put in here 2.5%. So we said we'll pay her 2.5% to do that.
But you're not in dual agency because the second person's not
The
represented.
second person is unrepresented. They're a customer, not a
Customer,
client.
okay, gotcha.
Bruce, I've got a question.
Hey, yes, Skip.
This is Avery.
Oh, Avery, go ahead.
Everywhere I'm hearing it the exact opposite from everywhere else. I'm hearing from other brokers and other agents that 2.5% or whatever it is, essentially they're just going to tell us, like if it's our buyer that's refusing to sign a buyer agency agreement, they're just going to tell us, sorry, you're out of luck, and that 2.5% is going to stay within their brokerage.
Well,
And that's the way that I'm reading the
who's going to
contract.
prepare that document? Yeah, who's going to prepare that document and send copies to the attorney and give them the name of a lender and stuff like that?
Well, that's the way I'm reading the document, is that the listing agent would do that because it's within the brokerage.
Now, if the listing agent is doing that as well, the listing agent's representing the seller as a client, but working with the buyer, not for, but with the buyer as a customer, then they would get that side, that 2.5%. So it's the same as if they had both sides of the transaction.
So they get the 5%.
5%, yeah. Because
And then-
nobody's going to work for free. You don't expect us to do that, do you, Mr. Seller?
Does that create a dual agency issue though?
Pardon me?
Does that create a dual agency issue?
No, because what we would have, we'd have a CIS signed by the buyer saying that they are unrepresented, they are a customer only.
Oh.
So they've acknowledged, we've got both sides of the transaction, but one side's a client, the other side's a customer. So that's not dual agency.
Okay.
But
Even though we have both sides, it's only dual agency if we represent both sides. We can write a contract and perform ministerial duties for a customer. We just can't give customers advice.
But it's much easier if you can get them to go ahead and sign a buyer agency.
It is much easier to get them to sign a buyer agency agreement. You're less likely as an agent to say something that you shouldn't. Here's the problem is if they're not represented, here's where we get in trouble. We act like their agent.
Well, that's
They
what I
think
was
we're
just
their
getting ready
agent,
to say.
and now we've got an implied
It's
agency
implied,
relationship.
and
so
then
if they do go into a buyer agency agreement with us, then we would just leave this blank because we are working with them separately.
Correct. Well, you wouldn't leave it blank. You put a number there in case they're not represented.
Oh,
But
I
if,
see. Okay.
but if
Got
they
it. Okay.
do have a buyer agency
Okay.
agreement with Beth, by way of my example, I'm listing, my side's 2.5.
Okay.
They have a buyer agency agreement with Beth. That agreement would specify what that side's getting paid,
Got it.
not
Okay.
this one.
Okay.
And if you were in a dual agent, your buyer agency agreement would specify what you were gonna get, not necessarily what's in the listing agreement.
Right.
Right.
That's
Yeah.
different. That could be
different.
different.
Yeah.
Because this is what the.
Yeah. So
sellers
this
do.
only addresses unrepresented buyers,
Okay, got it.
customers,
Customers.
people who
Got it.
refuse
Okay.
to sign anything but a CIS
Okay.
where they sign, I'm unrepresented, I'm a customer, I represent myself.
And where the
Bruce?
seller is agreeing to pay.
And the
Yeah.
seller's paying here, they would
Or-
say the extra.
So if the seller's not willing to pay it, then there has to be that negotiation with the customer to say, look.
If the seller wants to put 0 there, either that buyer's going to have to get
they're gonna
representation,
lose. Yeah.
Okay.
something in writing, or nobody's going to sell that house.
Well, that's-
Because as a listing agent, I'm not going to do the job of two agents
Right.
for the payment of one.
So another buyer.
I'm just not going to do it. Go elsewhere.
Yeah.
It's too much work. Skip?
Yes, Bruce, this afternoon, you and I are having a call with a seller.
Yes, at 2:30, I think.
Yes, and
Okay.
it's this additional ministerial tasks
Yes.
that he is perceiving that is a minimal service. So he's like, I'm not going to pay you another 2.5% to do additional ministerial tasks. So I think the wording alludes to, you know,
It
a
makes
little,
it sound like it's
a
minimal.
little extra effort.
Yeah. Yeah, that's what it sounds like there, Skip. So I understand his thought process, but
Yeah.
it says ministerial specifically because under the law, that's what it's identified as.
Yeah, the ministerial is
Those
a
are things
legal
that I
term.
do that do not require the exercise of my professional judgment. I don't give advice and counsel. Yes.
I wanted to emphasize that because I'll forget before we get on the call.
Yes.
But I think that is where his confusion or his objection comes.
It's not minimal duties. It's all the things that a selling agent would normally do. It's just that
We need
selling
to
agent is not
emphasize-
an agent for it.
We need to emphasize to him that ministerial is a legal term. It doesn't
Yeah,
mean
that's-
a
that
few.
word is
It doesn't
there.
mean- yeah.
That word is there from the definition of the what we're doing from the statute. That's why we use that word.
So it's a legal.
Not to make it mean minimal.
Okay, that's.
And I'm just bringing that up, Bruce, because you know that's something that probably needs to be emphasized this afternoon.
Yes. Yeah, that was my plan, Skip.
Yeah.
Can I just say that when all of you have a conversation with whoever's in the office with Bruce, we cannot decipher what you're saying.
Okay. If you don't hear
You all
something,
are having a conversation together and interrupting each other. We cannot tell what you're saying.
yeah, I know you're coming through the audio visual of the TV and not another speaker
Right.
here. So if you have trouble, just stop us or ask, and we'll stop and try to make it very clear.
What Alan is emphasizing or saying is, and I thought the same thing. I know that Bruce. I mean, Beth is in the room with Bruce, but we don't know who else is in the room with Bruce because once Beth has said something, and Bruce has said something, and then someone else said something, it's really on our end. It's getting all jarbled.
Yeah, we've got 6 people total in the room here in Lewis.
Yeah. I mean, it's a great forum, and we're all learning a lot. But I just wanted to point that out that as you guys are debating back and forth on our end, it's all getting jarbled up.
Okay, understood. So what I would put here, by way of example, I'd put 2.5 on the first section. Second paragraph, I'd put 2.5 more. That only applies if the buyer is not represented. They refuse. And they sign a CIS that says, I refuse. I am a customer. But I still want to make an offer on the property. Well, Mr. Seller, you still want us to sell it, don't you?
Hey, Bruce, I have a question if I can interrupt. Say that I'm the listing agent and I've got this agreement filled out where I'm going to get the other half of the commissioner, whichever we agree on.
Correct.
Am I allowed to show the property to a customer without having a written agreement as the listing agent?
Yeah, I think our listing agreement says we can show it to prospective buyers. And Andy Taylor and I have talked about that. We may do some modification. If we see as an industry that we're going to find more customers, we're hoping that does not happen. But if that does happen, we are prepared to adjust documents.
So we can show
we're
the property.
hoping it does not happen. And frankly, if a person chooses to be unrepresented, they're probably thinking they're going to save money, right? Because they don't have to sign an agreement. Well, guess what? They can negotiate maybe with Beth on my listing. They can maybe negotiate with Beth to represent them for 2%. So now they make an offer where the seller's got to pay me 2.5% per the listing, and Beth wants the 2% paid per her buyer agency agreement. That's a total of 4.5. That's still a savings of less than 5 that I would have charged if it was in-house. They're not saving money if we fill this out properly by going back to the listing agent as a customer. Unless the listing agent puts some ridiculous number in here. And that's why I discourage that. You've got two sides of work. It's the other side of the transaction. It's just in this side, the buyer is a customer, not a client.
and no one's representing them, but you still want me to sell it, right? You still want me to do all the paperwork for them and answer their questions and get this thing to the settlement table. Well, that's the other side of the transaction. Beth?
Going back to Skip's client, if he's having an issue with that, can you just put NA in there and then Skip, if he had a buyer, would just have to work with them as a buyer's agent?
Well, if they, did you hear the question, Skip? Did you hear Beth? Okay. So certainly Skip could do that. He could negotiate a buyer agency agreement, and then he'd get the listing signed and whatever he negotiated on the buyer agency agreement. But it's when they refuse to sign the buyer agency agreement and sign a CIS and say, I am unrepresented, I refuse to sign a representation agreement.
But that's not.
Well, if they want Skip to write that offer, he would not be a dual agent. He'd be working with a seller client and a buyer customer who's unrepresented. And that second side, this is where that 2.5% would come into play. So he'd be getting 5%. He'd have both sides, but one side would be a client, one would be a customer.
Yeah, I think we need to emphasize to this client today that it's no different than his former listing agreement that said 5%. If
that is correct,
if I by chance happen to be on both sides,
correct,
or if you as a member of Coldwell Banker happen to be on the other side under the former listing agreement, now this listing agreement says in an unrepresented buyer scenario that you are going to earn the 2.5%, or I'm going to earn the 2.5%, or Lucius Webb is going to get the 2.5% if he brings us an unrepresented buyer.
Yeah. In Skip's example, if Lucius Webb from Lingo is a sub agent, that's what we would pay them from that 2.5%. You do want every agent working out there trying to sell it for you, don't you?
Yeah.
What's the difference if you pay 5 or you pay 5? It's still 5.
Okay. So
Beth?
because you brought up sub-agent.
Yeah.
Where I'm not quite getting it, because you're telling us that we're not allowed to show a property unless we have a buyer agency agreement. So how is Lucius Webb showing a property as a sub-agent?
As a sub-agent, it's the same as if he was working for us. As a listing office, which he's acting like the listing office, as a listing office, we do not need a buyer agency agreement. If they refuse to sign one, we can show our own listings.
Okay.
We can't show anybody else's listing.
No, but can Lucius show our
If he's a
listing?
sub-agent, because it's the same as if he was working for us.
And Beth, I asked Bruce this question, and that is where the confusion is arising, because our client said, well, wait a minute, Lucius Webb can't show my house without a buyer agency agreement, and that's not the case.
Yeah,
There
you
are some
do
exceptions.
not need a buyer agency agreement. You have to give a CIS. You should try to get a buyer agency agreement on everything. But if they will not sign a buyer agency agreement, you don't need a written agreement to show our own company listings. It's only when you're showing a property on the MLS, somebody else's listings.
Oh, but can Lucius Webb show our listing if the buyer refuses to sign?
Only if we authorize sub-agency and he's acting in that capacity. Otherwise, he could not.
Okay, but we are recommending sub-agency.
We are. Yeah, we are.
And in our case, Lucius Webb would be a sub-agent
Coldwell Banker Premier.
and working with a customer unrepresented buyer.
That is correct.
And Lucius Webb would then be in as if he was, a cooperating co-broke getting the 2.5%. He's also getting the 2.5% under this condition or this scenario.
His company would be, yes, Lingo would be.
Yeah.
And they pay him accordingly. Yes.
And that's where the confusion has arisen in our customer who said, Skip, I agree, 2.5%. You've earned that on the listing side, but there's no way I'm going to pay you another 2.5% for ministerial tasks.
Yeah, understood.
Yeah.
I think
So is Lucius Webb then he would be getting paid as representing the seller though, is that right?
That's correct. He'd be a seller sub-agent of Coldwell Banker Premier. He'd be representing the seller. That is risky. I mean, he can say and do things that can cause trouble for his broker. And maybe for our broker. Andy Taylor's not sure. Certainly for his broker.
So what is in the is it in the listing agreement what the sub-agent will be paid?
No,
It's
because they're
not.
working for us. They'd have to call us and say, what do you offer me as a sub-agent? It does not say that anywhere. What we're
Okay,
paying them.
okay.
But my idea is that would be from that number, that side of the transaction, we get 2.5%.
The ministerial is what you're thinking.
Mhm.
Okay.
Do you,
Bruce-
this is Leslie, do you,
Oh, hold on.
sorry, this is
Go
Leslie.
ahead, Leslie.
Do you have to have a sub-agency agreement then in place?
No.
Okay.
If we authorize it, and on the MLS, we say we authorize it, you wouldn't need one. They may ask for one, we can certainly get one. You don't need one with the client, you don't need one with us. But the client would have to sign a CIS saying that the agent they're working with is an agent of the seller. That is an option.
So can you go over what our limitations are as sub-agents?
As a sub-agent, we answer factual, informational questions. We provide copies. We show properties, but we do not give advice. If they say, what should I offer? If they say, well, how's this neighborhood? Go talk to somebody or look it up on
Can
the
we
census.
provide comps?
I think you can provide
Because that's
comps because
public
comps are
knowledge.
generally public information,
Okay.
yes.
All right.
But we do not represent or give advice and counsel.
And you're
We
not
answer-
advising us to work as sub-agents?
No, no.
right?
We should try as hard as we can to stay away from that. It's not something we want. We're just in this new world we're in. You may see it. Honestly, I hope we don't, and I think maybe we won't. 'Cause
Yeah,
one
Bruce,
of
I was
the
gonna
buyers
ask.
unrepresented. What buyer wants to be unrepresented? If we prove to them that you can put it in your office.
Right.
Bruce, is this being discussed with Andy Taylor in the meetings? Because this all just kind of the sub agency and the unrepresented buyer just feels like a sneaky workaround to get back to how we did things before. And I really think the DOJ is not going to like that. Is that being discussed at all?
It is. We have, Andy and I have talked about it at length. The committee's talked about it. We talked about it again yesterday even. So the statute, if you look at the CIS, it's very clear that a person can remain a customer in Delaware. They do not have to be represented.
So
So the state law permits that.
So if you have a buyer that's struggling with signing a buyer agency agreement, you can say to them, let me see if the listing companies will allow me to show you as a sub-agent. So you could maybe show as a sub-agent while you form your relationship, and then you can change that relationship from a sub-agent to a buyer's agent.
I would think yes. Now, typically they say agency is something you wear like a tattoo, not a hat. It's not something you switch back and forth. But I would think you could start as a seller's sub-agent and then become a buyer's agent. Because in Delaware, remember, everybody gets confidentiality. Now, before that was the case, it was different. But now everybody gets confidentiality, client or customer, so it's not as big an issue.
In Beth's example, would it probably be easier just to say, we'll just do this make the buyer agency agreement for this
It's
day.
much easier just to say, we'll make it for this one property.
One property, right,
Yeah.
yes, right. But I mean, that's.
Bruce, I have a question. I'm not sure if you see my hand raised. It's
No,
Gina.
I'm sorry, I don't see your hands on the screen.
Oh, okay. I'm
Go
sitting here-
ahead.
I'm just gonna jump in, but I don't want to muffle everybody.
Nope,
I have a
jump right
question.
in.
Yeah. With regards to dual agency, I think we're gonna see a heck of a lot more than that, more of that. Like we say with the open houses, people don't want to sign that agency agreement. They want to get to know you first. So with regard to dual agency, where on this new listing agreement does it say what the seller will pay in that situation when the listing agent becomes a dual agent?
It doesn't.
It
Because
doesn't, right?
We don't know what that amount's going to be yet. It says what they'll pay on the listing side, but if you're a
Right.
dual agent, the other side has not yet been determined. Remember, if you're a dual agent, you'll have a buyer agency agreement, and that's where that side's determined. We don't know what that side is yet.
What if I don't have a buyer's agency agreement and it's someone, let's say, that just walks into my open house? Then what?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the question. What if
What
you
if-
don't have a buyer agency agreement?
Yeah, what if it's someone who walks into my open house, unattached, doesn't want to sign the agreement like we were saying? Then what? And it's going to be my buyer. How do I handle?
Then I would say if you will not sign a buyer representation agreement, then you need to sign the CIS indicating that you are unrepresented, that you are a customer.
Okay.
Okay,
And so sign here that you're a customer, that I do not represent you, and we'll move
Okay.
forward. I'll show you.
well,
the
what
file.
is the seller on the hook to pay for the buy, for me to represent the buyer and do all that work?
In that case, it's just second paragraph.
Second
2.5% under 10A, second paragraph, first line.
Okay, that would be considered
That's the ministerial
unrepresented
task.
buyer. Okay,
Yep. We say ministerial task, it makes it sound like minimal task. What we're saying there is all the things a buyer's agent does without being an agent for.
okay, so that would fall
That
under
side
that.
of the transaction is what
Okay.
we're referring to.
Okay,
We just don't want to call them clients or agents because we're not, they're customers.
so when I'm pitching my listing agreement to my seller, I need to bring up dual agency, and it would fall in that paragraph. That would fall under.
No,
that
no,
category.
no.
Don't bring that up.
Remember, if you're a dual agent, the buyer side of that dual agency will be part of the buyer agency agreement. Has nothing to do with the listing agreement.
Right, I'm just saying if it's an unrepresented buyer again that just attaches
That's
to me.
not dual agency.
That's really not.
Unrepresented buyer is not dual agency.
Okay. Okay.
Dual
That's where I'm
agency
getting
is only
hung up.
where we represent both sides. What you're referring to is
Okay.
a single agency. We have both sides of transaction, but one's
Right.
represented, one is not. And that's where this second
Right.
section comes into
So
play.
the goal is to, when a buyer walks into my open house and he wants to put in an offer, first get him to sign a buyer's agency agreement.
Correct.
That's the
Correct. Let's
easier way.
negotiate what you want to pay me to prepare this and to represent you.
Right, okay, got it. Thank you.
And remember, you're only a dual agent also, you individually, if you individually have both sides of transaction. The company might be a dual agent if both agents are in the company, but you as an agent are only a dual agent if you personally have both sides of the transaction.
Right,
If you're selling best listing, you're not a dual agent.
right, correct, yeah.
Okay?
Yep, got it.
All right.
Oh, my goodness.
So then it goes on, it says other compensation models may be negotiated. I think that you're probably going to have other things where companies maybe want to charge commissions for a buyer's agent because the NAR settlement still allows it, even though we don't recommend it. And Department of Justice doesn't want it. All right, I think you'll see more of like menu for services. Where they'll say we'll put up a sign for this much, we'll negotiate the sale for this much, we'll show the property for this much, that type of thing, menu for services. Or you may have language, I expect around here, you'll see, hey, we charge 2.5%, but if you buy a Rhine home in this community, we agree that we'll take 2,000.
I know.
Because different builders pay different amounts.
Terrible.
And if you're agreeable to that, you can put that in an addendum or special terms. Questions?
Hey, Bruce.
Yes, Brenda?
When you're talking, we're hearing all this background noise from the people in the room. If they could just keep it lower or something, because it really makes it hard to hear.
Okay, we'll try. We'll try, everybody. It's difficult, but we'll try.
Bruce, I do have one additional thought. I think I was not completely paying attention to your Ryan Holmes example. Can you repeat that?
Yes, we might say here that our buyer, when we get a buyer agency agreement, wouldn't be in the listing agreement, but in the buyer representation agreement, we might in the compensation section say we charge 2.5% to represent a buyer.
Right.
But then we may say, however, if the buyer purchases a home in
Let's say a Shell Brothers.
a Shell Brothers home, it'll be this.
Right.
It'll be 3%. So different builders have different rates they pay. So we could have different rates based on different builders. We just can't say we'll take what they offer. It has to be an ascertainable number. So you have to put the number in there.
But
It doesn't have to be one number across the board.
I would love to have the 2.5% apply to the Ryan Holmes scenario.
Well, you can do that too, but then what they're only going to pay 2,000.
Right.
So when you write the offer, or when the offer is being written for your client, you can ask them to incorporate that they'll pay your 2.5%. We know they're going to say no. So then you could go back to your buyer and say, you got to make up the difference. If the buyer says, oh, I don't have that money, then you've got a decision to make.
Right.
So you don't have to agree to it up front, but I know in some cases, agents are willing to agree to it up front. I charge this, but if I go to Capstone or Rhine, I realize I'll have to take less, and I agree to that up front.
Yeah.
So but you're putting a number in or a percent. It has to be an ascertainable number. It can't just be, I'll take what they offer me. You can't use that type of language. Okay. All right. So seller concession. Now, by the way, it says down under the paragraph, it says all compensation specified. That's our protection period. If we list a property and we show it, they cancel the listing, and then they turn around and sell it to that buyer that we introduced to the property within blank days, well, guess what? We're still the procuring cause and we still want to be paid. And that's the way I explain it to people. It protects us from unscrupulous sellers who would try to cancel the listing and then sell it direct and avoid paying us. But it says this provision does not apply. It's in bold language, does not apply in the event the subject property is listed with another broker at the time of the sale, because then you'll be paying another broker instead of us. It's not that you're trying to avoid paying a commission. All right. This protects us from unscrupulous sellers. That's how I normally word that when I'm talking to a seller. I usually put 365. If they balk at that, I say, all right, let's put 180. If they balk at that, I say, why?
Yeah.
Well, do you have plans of doing this? Now, you might take less, but I usually say 365. Nobody questions it. If they do question it, I put 180. And I don't know if anybody's ever questioned that. And if they do, I'd say, why are you concerned about this? You have plans of trying to circumvent me? It doesn't apply if you're just with another broker. All right. So then we go to section 11, concessions. And I'm going to instruct my seller, we need to check yes here. Remember when we were talking about compensation, we said you're going to pay me 2.5. Well, in a typical world, the buyer's going to have an agent and they're going to want their fee included in the sales price as well, just like the old days where you paid 5%, 2.5. Well, I'm getting 2.5, whatever the buyer negotiates, they may very likely put it in that you have to pay. In fact, I'll show you. On my listing presentation, I'd have a copy of the contract and I'd show them right where it's done. It says right here, see, here's how they do it. So, expect it, not necessarily, but expect most of the time you're going to see that they're going to ask for compensation. We don't know what that number is yet. But how we address that is you put in the MLS concessions, yes. That means you're willing to consider giving some kind of funds or credit for either a buyer's agent or a transfer tax or a closing cost, whatever. Most likely, though, buyer's agent's fee. That's the one you're going to see most commonly. You're not committing to any dollar amount at all. You're just saying you're willing to consider that. You understand that's a possibility. You're open to that. So we should check yes. And I'd move right on as if there wasn't even anything to discuss. Honestly, when you stop and act like it's something that should be negotiated, that's when they start asking questions. This is matter of fact. Move right on. I recommend you do this.
Bruce?
Yes,
Bruce?
Brenda?
Early on, during all of this change, am I correct in saying that seller concessions did not include commissions?
Well, on the sales agreement, they're broken apart. On the sales agreement, you've got the buyer's agent fee and the concession. There's two different things. On the listing agreement, they're combined. It's just concessions. I'm open to give credits. The reason they're broken apart on the sales agreement is because we don't want the buyer's agent's compensation to be included in the other concessions, which are limited by lender. They're called interested party contributions, IPCs. And they usually have limits of anywhere from 3 to 6%, depending on the lender. Well, if we separate the buyer's agent's fee out of that, then it doesn't count towards that limit. They can pay both. If they're allowed to pay 6% interested party contribution, they can pay 6% and pay 3% commission. The lender's okay with that. But if you say you're paying 9% concession, the lender's not okay with that. So for listing, they're all concessions. On the sales agreement, we separate it. Got it?
Thank you.
Yep. And if I don't explain something well enough, just let me know or call me afterwards. But that's why we separate it on the sales agreement for lender purposes. Now, section 12, we're talking about authority to cooperate. It's implied that we're going to cooperate with buyer's agents. Do we want to offer sub-agency? And that's B, we have to check yes or no. I recommend, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, that you check yes in that rare event that we find a buyer that refuses to be represented or refuses to sign a buyer agency agreement and they're working with another agent from another firm. We're okay with offering their sub-agency. So I recommend we check yes. They're probably going to say, not even have a question. I'd move right on. I wouldn't stop and hesitate. This is the exclusive agreement. 13, this is an exclusive agreement. Now you can't list it with anybody else during the term of this listing. You've authorized us, and I'm going to move quickly through the rest of this fine print, which is the same way I'd go over it with a seller. Yes.
Real quick, in the MLS, then if you're gonna do sub-agency, you're gonna make sure you check.
You're going to check yes inside.
That's not any MLS currently.
It's not,
No.
but I want to see if we can't get that put back in. So they may have to call us now and ask us, but I don't know why they would have removed that box. I think it was maybe unintentional.
Oh, okay.
What box is that, Bruce?
Sub-agency, yes, no, in the MLS. I'm hearing that the box is gone.
Is it under the bottom where you can
No,
put
it's
add?
not there at all.
Yeah. So we may have to check into that. But either way, we want to authorize it. So if we're asked, yes, we will. It's not our preference, but yes, we'll do that. So under disbursements of deposits, section 14, I'm going to say, we're authorized to accept a deposit on your behalf. There's only certain ways we can disperse it. Hopefully we'll go to settlement, apply it towards the purchase price. The sale falls through, we'll get a mutual release. If we can't do that, we can disperse it under court order, passage of time, or an interpleader. But we're very limited as to how we handle other people's money, escrowed funds. We can only disperse them under these conditions, and here they are. And then I'd move on. I would then go right probably to section 15. The seller represents, and here's what I say. Seller represents in A, that everything you've told me is true and accurate. I can rely on it and use it as a basis to present the property to the public. B, you're going to hold me harmless from using a lockbox. It's probably easier to break in the house than it is a lockbox, but if somebody breaks into the lockbox and gets in your house, you're saying you're not holding me liable for that, or the Association of Realtors.
Yeah, where you see my box.
I'm down later on in another section. I'm just rambling, Beth. So it says you're going to indemnify me. There is another section where it says you're going to indemnify me using the lockbox, but we'll get to that in a second. This says you're going to indemnify me if you've told me something that's wrong or inaccurate and I pass it on, then I'm indemnified.
Okay.
C, you're going to conduct all negotiations through me. And I always tell a seller this. I put a sign in your yard, somebody may stop. And they may say, hey, is your house for sale? Can I take a look at it? And you're going to say, well, call my agent. And they're going to say, well, I'm on my way to DC. I'm in a hurry. I got to see it now or I can't see it. Call my agent. I'm going to give you some of my business cards. You can put them right here. Tell them to call me. If I'm not available, we got lots and lots of agents. Somebody will come. Do not let that person in your house. You do not know if they just got out of jail or escaped from jail and they're a convict. You do not know their intentions or their qualifications. Do not let them in your house. So I'm going to leave you some cards for that purpose. And that's when I usually take my cards out and give them some cards. You're going to conduct all negotiations through me and refer prospective buyers and inquiries to me. You're responsible under D for the condition of your property, not me. You got to maintain it and keep it in proper condition. And E, you've been given and read and signed a Delaware CIS. And remember, you have to give it to them at the first scheduled appointment, first showing, or before they sign an agreement. They're getting ready to sign a brokerage agreement, so you have to have the CIS signed now. You have to have a signed CIS. All right. Here's the seller's obligations. You're going to give good, clear, marketable title. In B, you're going to sign a deed, or if it's leasehold estate, you'll sign a assignment of lease. C, you're going to provide me with all the information and documents I need to market your property. Maybe if you've got a lease, I need a copy of the lease. Maybe I need to know what your taxes are and all that. I always tell sellers most of this information I can get publicly available off the internet. But if you've got a lease, I can't get that. Or if you've got some other thing that I don't have access to, you'll provide that to me so I can sell your property. D, you understand that all taxes, rents, water, sewer, condo fees, those type of things are all prorated as of the day of settlement. You pay to the day of settlement, the buyer pays going forward. If you prepaid, they'll reimburse you. We'll address the same thing in the agreement of sale. E, you give me access to the property and the ability to use a combo or electronic lockbox. We don't use combo lockboxes. We use electronic lockboxes provided by SCORE. And here's where it says, I am authorized to give a temporary one-day code to people who I deem should have it. It's up to my discretion, and it holds me harmless if they break into the lockbox or something. Seller agrees to refer all inquiries to me. Once again, it says, and that it says in G that you have fully and accurately disclosed all information on the seller's disclosure. If there's a defect, you've disclosed it in writing. H, you're going to give me access at reasonable times for the purpose of showing it. And you'll give access to inspectors and appraisers once we get it under contract at reasonable times. And you'll have the utilities on if it's, for instance, a home inspection where they need to inspect the utilities or appliances. And I, that's Form 5403. I always say, if you're a Delaware resident, you're moving out of state, there is a tax that is not a new tax. It's always been there, but the state of Delaware is going to tax you on the gain on your property. This isn't a transfer tax. It's a profit tax on your gain. Now, one thing you need to understand, if it's your primary residence, if you're married filing jointly, it's been your primary residence for 2 of the preceding 5 years, $500,000 of gain is excluded from taxation. So that first $500,000 of profit, you don't have to pay any tax on if you're married filing jointly and it's been your primary residence for at least 2 of the preceding 5 years. But this is for those instances where out-of-state owners own properties. They've held them for 20 years. They've got a $2 million windfall profit. The state says, hey, we're not asking for any extra tax, but the tax that you owe the state of Delaware from that profit, we want it now, not when the tax year is over, when you file your tax return. Because since you're not a Delaware resident, you may go to New Jersey and forget to file your Delaware tax return. So we want it now. It's not a new tax. It's just we want it now, and you have to have it now. Yes. So Glenn's hand first. Glenn, go ahead.
Can you define reasonable times for me?
No. It says reasonable time. Now, different people would think, I don't know if you all on the call heard that, what's reasonable time? To me, reasonable time is probably for a home inspection or an appraiser. Certainly I would think 9 to 5, maybe 8 to 6, but 9 to 5, Monday through Friday, certainly, you know, I'm going to call 2 or 3 times, try to make an appointment. If they constantly say, no, 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 that's not reasonable, in my opinion. That would be for a jury to decide. I've never had that become a real issue. Okay. Other question? Yes.
Oh, I think it's a 250,000 for a single person.
Single person, 250, married, filing jointly, 500. And it's 2 the preceding 5 years. Doesn't have to be the immediately 2 preceding. Any 2 or a combination thereof in the preceding 5 years.
Okay.
Okay. And it's not a new tax or additional tax. It's the tax you would normally pay. It's just they want it now so you don't conveniently forget to pay it later. Now, under seller acknowledgement in 17, it says in 17A that the seller is cautioned to safeguard their valuables to avoid theft and damages. I always say, you know, this is a two-way street here. You want your house on virtual tour. You want lots of pictures, right? But you realize when I do virtual tours, any person that has the internet can see your house. They can see how to get in, how to get out, and all your valuables. I recommend that you put certain things away out of sight, out of mind. In fact, if it's something that's going to be excluded, you may want to just remove it from the house now and get it out of here. But I tell my sellers, here's what here's what crooks typically want. They don't steal TVs that much anymore, stuff like they want drugs and guns. That's drugs and guns is what they want to steal. And put that stuff up and get it out of sight. So I've cautioned you, and it says here I'm authorized to use the lockbox. And I made some of the lockbox language, it runs together, but it does say that they indemnify us if somebody breaks into the lockbox and gets in. 17B, here's where it talks about lockbox again. And here's where it holds me harmless and the local association of realtors who owns and provides the lockboxes. 17C. You understand, Mr. Seller, I'm going to be taking pictures and photographs. Now you understand that I'm going to use that to market your property. And I'm going to put it on the internet and I'm going to put it everywhere. And as long as I'm paying for the advertising, I can put it anywhere I want. And you understand that those images are going to be out there. It does say listing broker cannot control unauthorized use of digital or social media. The internet, I tell people, it's like taking confetti and throwing in the wind. Now go try to get all the pieces. You will never do it. Once it's out there, it's everywhere. And when we list your house on the internet, it's immediately going to go to over 700 sites. I think it is already. It's just going everywhere. But that's what we want, right? In today's world, that's what we have to do. It says in D, you authorize me to put a for sale sign up. Once it goes pending, I can put a sale pending or a sold sign. And E, I would ask them, do you have any audio visual recording surveillance systems in your property? If so, we're going to check yes, and we're going to put a notice at the door, clearly visible at the entrance of the property. That would be a requirement. You don't have to turn it off, but you have to put a notice. We don't want a buyer coming in here and saying things that they won't want you to hear, and you just intentionally be installing an audio visual system and sitting down the street listening to everything they say.
Do you have to put a notice if you've got external as opposed to internal cameras?
I would say I would. For instance, a Ring doorbell,
Right.
I would put a notice that the property is under surveillance or by Ring doorbell, because that Ring doorbell can pick up audio, and you could be standing in the garage and the doorbell could very easily pick it up.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that would apply, would be my interpretation.
Okay, thanks.
Question in the room, yes.
I also put in the MLS for the agent, under agent remarks, just advising them that this home is under audio visual surveillance.
Not required, because I tell all agents when you show a property, presume that's what's happening. But if you put it in there, that's allowed. But I always just presume the seller's listening to what I say. So don't say, boy, this place is a dump. Because then the broker is going to be getting a call an hour later from the seller saying, you know what your agent said? Wait till you get outside out of reach. All right. So 18 broker authorization. A, I'm authorized to accept the deposit and hold it in our escrow account. We've already talked about that before. B, I'm authorized to advertise any way I deem advisable. I got to comply with the laws and the rules and regulations of the Real Estate Commission. But I'm paying for it, so I can put it anywhere I want. C, I'm authorized to put it on a multiple listing service. And of course, when it sells, I'm going to put the price it sold and if there's any concessions and stuff like that. D is where we have a choice here. We're going to put DA, do you want your property on the internet? Well, anybody that says no, then there's a warning underneath that says when you say no, you eliminate all the people that are searching on the internet because they're not going to see it on the internet. Everybody puts yes for DA. Do you want the address? DB or DB. Most of the time I put yes. Some people may try to hide the address. They want their picture and all that, but they don't want them to know the address of the property so they don't break in or something. And our time's about up, but I'm just about ready to wrap up here. If you have to leave, feel free to do so. But I'm about to wrap up. I usually check yes, yes, no, no, or yes, 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 yes. In today's world, the automated valuation, that's your Zillow estimates. That's your realtor estimates. They're going to do that probably anyhow. Your estimates of value. So I just check yes now.
How would you stop
I don't know if you can. It used to be if you check no, your information wouldn't feed to those sites. But I think I just check yes, 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 yes now. And the blogging, that's where if somebody sees your information online, they can go online and blog. Boy, I saw this house today. It's a dumper. I have no control over the internet. It's the wild, wild west. It's just a marketing tool we have to use. So there's no correct or incorrect answer there to those 4 questions. The only thing is whatever you get answered there, and I usually now go put yes, yes, no, no, or yes, 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 yes. Whatever you say there is what you want to put on the MLS. So then the MLS, you put the same thing that your seller authorized. I talk about, I'm going to put together fact sheets and information. I'm going to receive offers, present offers, help you negotiate. This is under F. I'm going to answer your questions, prepare negotiating strategies. Under G, we need to talk about multiple offers. We should be, we're fortunate if we get multiple offers. Sometimes you don't feel that way as an agent, but it's when you get multiple offers, and in some markets, that's very common. I've had homes where we've gotten 23 offers on one house at one time. So some of those agents may say, well, do you have other offers? I need your instructions how you want me to answer that question. Because if you say yes, I'll answer it. If you say no, I'm going to answer my seller's not authorized me to answer that question. That's a true statement, even if I have other offers. I'm not saying no, because that's a lie. I'm saying my seller's not authorized me to answer that question. And the reason it's up to you, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, is because normally if you say there's other offers, it's going to create a bidding war. But it could also, and I have personally seen this happen where we had 2 offers, it could cause both our buyers to walk away and say, I'm not getting in a bidding war. And then you have no offers. So that's why I'm asking you. I usually recommend that you do authorize it A, or a lot of times what I'll recommend is C, which says, hey, I'll forget about it between now and the time it happens. You'll give me instructions when it happens. I'll ask you at that time, and then you'll tell me. So that's what C is for. So I use C a lot of times. Yeah, I use C because honestly, we'll talk about it now and they'll forget and I'll forget and I'll have to go pull the listing up and read it up.
The problem is it could be like a Johnny on the spot thing.
Where
somebody calls you.
Yeah.
Where you check A, you already.
If you check A, you know the answer's covered. Yes, you can. And either one of those is fine. Checking B, I don't necessarily recommend that. I usually use A or C. Now, fair housing, we won't discriminate based on any of the protected classes. And of course, now there's a new protected class, and that's going to be current housing status. So you can't discriminate against homeless people. The homeless have a Bill of Rights now. So any kind of protected class, we can't discriminate. I talked to my seller about love letters. That's the supplemental offer letters. That's where a buyer says, oh, Mr. Seller, your house is so beautiful. I love the backyard. My handicapped son will be able to play in the backyard, and it's going to be so wonderful. We've been looking for a house like this. It's perfect. Well, maybe the seller says, oh, I'd like to have the handicapped son. The seller maybe just made a decision based on a protected class, which could be discriminatory. Or may say, I'm not going to sell to that person because they gave me a picture and I saw maybe it's a race or ethnic background or something. I'm not going to sell to that person. That's against the law. So I say, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, I'm not going to keep letters from you. Some states, they try to do that. And the states, the courts have said they can't do it because it's an infringement on free speech. I'll bring them to you, but I want you to understand, you need to be very careful if you're going to look at a love letter or a supplemental offer letter. You need to be aware that if you make a decision based on a protected class, you could be violating the law. Number 21, this listing agreement is binding on you, your heirs, executors, assigns, etc. I don't know how binding that is legally, but that's what the form says. 22 is our addendums. You'll complete a seller's disclosure. They say, well, I don't need to do a disclosure. I'm exempt. Okay, you'll complete an exemption form. There's going to be one of the 4 forms. You need to complete a lead-based paint if it was built prior to 1978. It's a federal law. Well, we're probably going to use one anyhow, just so it's your own record saying it was built prior to 78. You're going to need a radon disclosure if you need a seller's disclosure, because the exemptions for the radon disclosure are the same as the seller's disclosure. In fact, the exemption form says exemption, seller's disclosure, and lead-based paint, or radon, I'm sorry, seller's disclosure, radon exemption form. The radon law and the seller's disclosure law in Delaware are the same law. They're just different paragraphs. So the exemptions at the end of that law apply to both. So if you need a seller's disclosure, you need a radon disclosure. Now, the Kiowa Delaware Uniform Common Interest Ownership Act, that's our condominium law. are our planned communities. If we need one of those, we have two choices here. And that is, we either go ahead and get the form now, the resale form, and we'll attach it and check yes. Probably not likely we're going to have that when we get the listing. You may get it, almost immediately thereafter. Or B, we're going to check B. We understand that I've given you a listing addendum. It's a one-page document that says, hey, you got a right. Get it and provide it now, or get it and provide it later. If you get it and provide it now, the downside is it's only good for 180 days. And then you got to renew it. 120, maybe it's 120 days, 120 days. Used to be 90, it's 120 now. 120 days. After that, you got to renew it, and there may be a fee. They say, oh, well, then I'll wait and get it later. The downside of that is if you give it to them after they write the contract, then they have, once you give it to them, they have 5 days to cancel the agreement. Get out of jail free card. They changed their mind, they just cancel the agreement, and you have to give them back their deposit. Which do you prefer, check A or B? So that just covers us that we've explained that to them.
What's the,
It is now the threshold for those of you online. The threshold question now is it's around $790, I think. It goes up are they changing? That's the question. It goes up 3% every year on July 1st. It actually started at $500 even. It goes up 3% every year, compounding. There's been talk of changing that statute so that it's a flat fixed number, so it doesn't change every year, because nobody remembers the dollars and cents amount. But there is in dot loop, there's a flow chart, and it's been updated as of July 1st of 2024 with the new amount, if you need to know. It's around $790. Most communities aren't near that threshold. They're well below or they're well above. Most of them are $1,200 or more, or they're $2,000 or more, or they're 50 or 100 or 200. All right, the CIS, you have to have a signed CIS. Septic inspection report, you don't have to have that now, but if you got it, you can attach it. You will need it before you sell the property unless you qualify for an extension. List of lien holders on my screen, and I don't think you see it because you can't see my screen on the internet there. I've got coming soon addendum. At the last minute, we took that out. It is not. If you've got the dot loop package in front of you, it does not say coming soon, because once the MLS Bright came out with that addendum that they have that says when the property is available and how coming soon applies and the rules and all, we no longer need a coming soon addendum. So with the new Bright addendum, there was no need for us to do a coming soon addendum. We just removed that language.
can you clarify what the active date of the listing is?
Yes.
Is it when you enter it in, even as coming soon, or is it when it goes live?
For days on market purpose, I don't know about that, but let me tell you how this works.
For like Ellen, for signing,
Okay.
signing
Okay.
listing agreements.
Yep.
She wants the listing agreement that when the broker signs it.
Right.
To be the same as like when you look in there and it says listing.
Available for the public to know about. There's a comment about that.
What does
All
that
right.
mean?
Here's what it means, because you're going to see on this listing agreement now at the bottom, it says the listing's effective when the listing agreement's signed by the party, even though it may not be on the MLS or publicly marketed yet. So we did that language. So once you get a listing agreement, you're protected. If they sell it the next day, whether it's on the MLS or not, you're protected. You've gone out and got virtual tours and all that, you're protected. The listing agreement's binding. But for the MLS, it says the public is available for the public to know about, and you put a date. That's the date. Prior to that date, you cannot tell anybody it's for sale. You've got a signed listing, but it's not on the market. That signed listing is just for your protection. That date in the MLS is when the public is entitled to know about it. That's the date that starts the 2-day clock that you must have it in Bright.
Okay. So.
Yeah, so in Bright, in the first line of the second half of that section, it says the public is, you may make this property available for the public to know about it. That's the day that the 2-day clock starts for Bright to get it in the system. And prior to that day, it's not for sale, even though you have a signed listing agreement.
When I go to enter a listing, the question is the list date.
Yes.
What is the list date?
The list date is the date on the MLS.
Yes, not on that bright form, in the MLS. What is the list date?
You referred to the bright form. The date on that, when the public can learn about it. That's what I put.
And so it's going back.
This just protects us until, while we're getting our
Doesn't
virtual
the
tours.
public know about it when it's in the coming soon status or no?
It won't be incoming soon until that 2-day window starts, that day on bright. You don't put it incoming soon. You don't put it on the MLS anywhere until that date where it says, I don't have it right in front of me, but it says the public is available to know about this property or publicly available. That doesn't mean publicly available to show. That means public knowledge. You can tell people it's for sale. That's when the 2-day clock starts to put it on bright.
So that can be your coming soon or your live date.
That's correct. Now, the coming soon, you would still use that date on the bright addendum and have it in the system within 2 days. But then you'd go down to the fourth option and coming soon, and you'd put one you want it to come on the market as active as opposed to coming soon. So nobody knows about it. The listing sign, we're protected. But we can't publicly tell anybody about it to the date in the bright MLS addendum. Coming soon, if we want to put it as coming soon status in bright, that's the fourth addendum, our fourth option, and we put a date. It'll be coming soon until this date when it'll automatically become active. There is no 120-day maximum on coming soon anymore. There's no limit. But folks, what's the purpose of using the coming soon create an urgency? It wasn't 120 days. It was what? 30 days, 21 days, 21 days. Yeah. There's no 21 days anymore, but there's no limit. So you could put coming soon to be active in 2 years. Well, what's the purpose of that? But it just makes it so the coming soon is not limited to 21 days. All coming soon means, it doesn't mean we'll have a listing soon. We have a listing now. All coming soon means is you can't see it until this date. That's all it means. It's for sale. You can make an offer sight unseen. It can be marketed, but nobody's allowed to see this house and enter it until this date. That's what coming soon means.
So
We don't want anybody in it.
So that when you're entering in the MLS, and I'm sorry if I'm being repetitive.
That's
here.
okay.
When you're entering in the MLS, the date that when it says list date that you fill in is,
I would put the date that's on a bright document when the public can know about it,
okay.
because that's when your 2-day clock starts. And if you put a date prior to that, when the listing was signed, they're going to say it wasn't in within 2 days. All right. So we are at homeowners warranty. We just tell people they're available. That's only so they don't come back and say, hey, you had this tool in your toolbox. You didn't tell us about it. Arbitration. Do you want to bind us and you to arbitration if we have a dispute? Not only binds you, the seller, it binds us, the broker. If you don't check either box, then the answer is no. It's the same as if you don't agree. This is the entire agreement number 26. It can only be signed if we do something in writing and everybody signs it. You're saying in 27 that you've read it, you understand it. In 28, you have the authority to sign this document, and then you're going to sign. And then the broker needs to sign it, or the broker's authorized representative. Some brokers let the agent sign it on their behalf. And it says this agreement is binding once it's signed by the seller and the authorized representative or broker, even though nobody's allowed to know about it yet. The purpose is that gives us time to spend money and get tours and all that. That's why a lot of people used to use the coming soon, because they wanted to get older. Don't need to do that anymore. You can get it listed and your 2-day clock doesn't start until the date on the bright.
So just to be clear, so the seller signs it, say, on the 21st.
Yes.
The broker doesn't sign it until the 23rd. Is that when the clock starts and it has to be in the MLS?
No, the 23rd would be the day that we are protected. Now, if the bright MLS said the 25th, the 25th would be the day the 2-day clock starts.
Okay.
You could have 2 different dates, yes.
All right.
But if it says the 25th on the bright addendum, then we're not telling people about it on the 24th. You can't have it both ways. So your 2-day clock starts when you're authorized on that bright addendum, which has to be signed by the seller.
No.
And they're acknowledging that's when we can publicly make it available. We can tell people about it.
Okay, that's not necessarily the listing date then.
No, it's not. Could be
Okay.
different dates. Could be different dates.
Okay.
Yes.
So our ratified date is when the broker signs it, correct?
That would be our ratified date. The date the public can learn about it would be the bright date. That's the date the 2-day clock starts.
So you have 2 days to get it in the right.
2 days to get into the bright from that date on the bright addendum. I know it's a little confusing, but the purpose is agents were wanting protection to go out and spend money and time to get virtual tours and aerial drones and all that before they could put it in the system. And they were being told, well, no, you got an effective listing to have it to protect you. Well, once it's effective, you got 2 days to get it in the system. Well, this solves that. Get a listing, protect yourself. The seller signs saying it won't be publicly known until this date, and that's when your 2-day clock starts for bright. Okay? And
Does
that,
the
folks, is the
broker have
listing.
to sign it before that date though? When will your broker allow potential buyers to learn about this property? Should
I
that
think
date match the date the broker signs it?
The broker can sign it that day, or they can backdate it a previous date. Doesn't matter when the broker signs it. The only thing that matters as far as when the broker signed it is our protection purposes, should the seller try to sell it between that time and the time it's allowed to go live.
Okay, gotcha.
Okay, so they could be separate dates, and that's the reason to protect us while we're getting it ready to market. But the seller's aware of that. The seller knows it will not be on the market until this date it's in the bright system, and they've agreed to that too. Okay, so we have a contract, but it's not publicly available till this date. If it can't be shown to another date, that's the coming soon date.
So where Ellen wants those dates to be the same.
They don't have to be the same, Ellen,
That's
no.
not going to be the same.
Yeah. The broker's signature date could be the same, or it could be prior to, and there's no limit how far prior to. The 2-day clock starts from the bright date. Okay? All right, any questions? I've run over time a little bit, but I think we've covered most. If you have questions, let us know. That's how to fill it in, okay?
Very helpful.
All right. Thanks, everybody.
Should be